to call the meeting to order. It is now 6 p.m. on the dot, and this is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We'd like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. Mr. McCoy, will you please lead us in the pledge?
The pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Mankiw.
Here.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
All right. 7 members present. We have a quorum. For those of you that don't know, we had to cancel the last meeting because we did not have a quorum, so it's unexpected illnesses. Okay. Is there anything that the board would like to move from consent to new business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankiw.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. The agenda is approved. It's now time for the board/superintendent salutes, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. We do have one tonight, and it's part of the consent agenda. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Bogan, and she can talk us through it and share the appreciation for the donation.
Sure. So tonight on the consent agenda, you will see that we received a donation from Sierra Hardwoods to Kaneland Harder Middle School for roughly $1,300 worth of hardwood boards for them to use in their industrial arts wood shop. And so we would just like to share our appreciation for Sierra Hardwoods. This donation was a direct result of Mr. Lavorsi, who is a teacher here at Harder, and his connection in the community with folks who work over at Sierra Hardwoods. And so Mr. Lavorsi actually took his own personal time to go and pick up all of the boards, to pick up the donation. And so we just wanted to share, our gratitude for their generosity, for everyone involved in taking that time, because we know that this will directly impact just opportunities that students here at Harder have for that hands-on work. So just a big thank you to Sierra Hardwoods, to Mr. Lavorsi, and then also to the assistant principal Chris Weiss and Principal Brian Faulkner here for encouraging those unique learning opportunities and innovative experiences.
Then the only other thing I wanted to share, typically we would have Mrs. Patterman from Harder here, and then Mr. Rollman from the high school, our athletic directors. They are going to either be at the meeting next week on December 16th to go through our fall sports, athletics, and activities. Some of our students, the students come in and share some of the successes from the season, or based on the coaches' availability and student availability, we may push that one to January. So both of them do a good job trying to find the date when we can get as many students and coaches here to represent their programs. So we don't have it tonight, but we'll either have it at the next meeting or January 13th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rowland.
I would like to, I don't have any personally, but Mr. Joe Kryshak from the Lions Club would like to do a salute, so I'd like to invite him to the podium.
It's a big deal for me tonight. Whatever the issue is here, be it books, be it movies, be it carnivals, whatever our agenda is, or the Lions agenda, seems to be your agenda, or the Kaneland agenda. And it permeates throughout your system. And it's not by accident. Even I know that. So we have a Distinguished Distributor Award presented to Dr. Todd Ledden for nurturing an environment to help those in need. Elburn Lions Club 2024.
appreciate that. It's been, as Joe talked about, the work that we have done together, it is truly we. There's, without the Lions, Kaneland wouldn't be able to do the work, and without Kaneland, the Lions couldn't do the work. So it has been a great great teamwork over the years of all the events that we've put on that's helped the Elburn community and the whole Kaneland community. So we're lucky to have Joe, and we've got a movie coming up December 28th, so if you've got a little one that wants to come to a movie, we've got the next joint activity planned, and
Right.
thank you, Joe. I
And
appreciate
use
it.
the popcorn makers.
I'm the popcorn. If you want popcorn, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Very
Thank
kind
you.
of you.
Thank you for that. Congratulations, Dr. Latham. Thank you. Truly appreciative of what you do. Okay. No other salutes. We will move to consent agenda. The consent agenda contains the following information. Action items: approval of accounts payable and payroll November 2024, approval of the treasurer's report November 2024, approval of minutes of the November 11th, 2024 regular meeting, approval of personnel, approval of destruction of audio recordings from the closed session meetings from June 2023, approval of the 2023, I'll keep going, 2024 audit reports for Kaneland and Fox Valley Career Center, approval of the Kaneland High School course book, second reading, approval of HPS group purchasing, approval of Infinite Campus credit card processing fees, approval of donations from Sierra Hardwoods, approval of the December 2024 parameters, and the following informational items: the student suspension data report, field trip notification, and the Freedom of Information Act report. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent items listed.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankinski.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The consent agenda is approved. Okay, moving right along, we're going to move forward to public comments. And I believe we have some people signed up. We do. Yep. So, we use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everyone to state your name and village of residence for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. Those who speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So first up, I will call George Davidson.
My name is George Davidson. I live in Maple Park. I've been a resident of Maple Park for about 18 years and so forth. First, I want to talk about taxes. I talked to Dr. Bogan a few days ago. I did a little research on my taxes. I read in the Kane County Chronicle that the taxes were going to go up, so I got nervous. About a month ago, I got a notice from DeKalb County, which is the county I live in, that they were going to raise my assessment by 17%, which means my taxes are going to go up 17%. And a point of history, in 2020, I paid this school district, $5,843. In 2021, I paid them $5,991. In 2022, I paid $6,222. In 23, I paid $6,378. I've asked the assessor to reevaluate my assessment. They said they would, but I haven't got responses yet. If they don't, my new tax burden to Kaneland School District will be $7,920. That's quite a hit for me, since I'm a senior citizen with a fixed income. That's going to hurt. It's going to hurt very deeply. And if you folks here are talking about raising 4.4% is what I understand the new tax that you're talking about adding to the tax base. If they lower my tax, as they've talked about doing, it would still increase my taxes, or my tax would be $7,362. That's just Kaneland School District. Not the other taxes for DeKalb County, the village of Maple Park, or nothing else. That's a lot of money for somebody with a fixed income. Just so you understand that when you take your votes. And you're talking about a referendum coming up in April. That's a ton of money. And I don't know what you're talking, big dollars in referendum. I'll guarantee you to this day, I will put a sign in my yard to vote no for your referendum. I cannot afford it. Plain and simple. I hope you understand that. Nothing against the school, I just cannot afford. I can't afford what you're doing now. And I know you didn't do the assessment. The lady at the assessment office and claimed that they have not raised my assessment in several years. That's just not true. I looked at my assessments. I told Mrs. Bogan that they had not, because the lady had told me they had not. But they did. They did every year they raised my assessment. So, for whatever that's worth. Secondly, I tried to look up who was the superintendents, who's the assistant superintendents, their salaries, all that stuff. Folks, you make a lot of money. I'm sorry, but you make a lot of money.
Mr. Davidson, your time is up. There'll be a second opportunity near the end of the meeting to speak again.
Has 3 minutes went by already?
Yes, sir.
Get around.
Okay. Next up, we have Giovanna Owens.
Is it okay if I hold it? All right, my name is Giovanna Owens, and I am a resident of Montgomery, Illinois. Good evening, superintendents and esteemed members of the board. I'm here tonight to tell you about our son, who has been denied access to education for 13 days. It is inconceivable to us that this is happening in this day and age. This approach to exclude our son from his school undermines the discussions we've had with the team and the special education department and disregards his rights under FAPE, free appropriate public education. And quite frankly, it is illegal. We feel as though our insights into our son's potential and his value as a human being have been completely overlooked. As his parents, we have observed a troubling lack of personalized attention and dedication to the staff's chosen profession and resistance to training opportunities. We've also faced resistance to inclusive education, specifically due to his diagnosis of trisomy 21, leading to the decision to outplace him. This difficulty is further compounded by a noticeable lack of participation and refusal from members of the educational team. These are the educators that you chose and approved and hired to serve our community. And we request that you take a hard look into these teachers and administrators. Despite our agreement to explore alternative placements, our son was turned away from his school last November 15th. This happened even with the assistance of the Montgomery Police Department to escort him back into the building, where the officer was told by the school principal that my son's needs could not be placed above the needs of the rest of the students in the building. What does that say to my son about his value? Furthermore, what does it say about these educators working in our buildings? He poses no threat to himself or others, yet he has been traumatized by not being able to join his siblings and friends for his school day. This situation has not only led to a sense of discouragement, but also has fostered a feeling of isolation in the decision-making process of our son's education. It is essential to highlight that our primary interest lies in our son's growth and development, and we have remained dedicated to working together to find a constructive path forward. Unfortunately, the district seems to favor removing students. Investing in outplacement is a financial burden for the district, especially amidst discussions of funding a referendum. Family like ours would support such initiatives if we had confidence that our children would benefit rather than be pushed out. We appreciate your time and commitment to our students and school district, and we urge you to push for change in the special education department. Seek out the right personnel, and most importantly, begin the shift to foster inclusion in our schools and see the value in all our children's lives. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Owens. Okay, Next up, we have Chris Duffy.
All right, so I'm Chris Duffy. I've lived in the village of Elburn for over 20 years. I have 3 kids that all attended Kaneland. My wife's a teacher. My oldest daughter's a teacher. Most of our friends are teachers. I'm the director of disability at a local house of worship. I work at a church. I work with friends from preschool to adulthood. So this evening I'm here just to lend my voice and advocate for Ozzy, who is Gio's son, first grader with Down syndrome, whose right to inclusion and dignity is being overlooked. I'm here to lend my voice to someone who cannot be here to speak for himself. He's being outplaced by the district for what I believe could be boiled down to safety concerns, but in reality it's more likely based on convenience. My understanding is the decision's already been made, so I'm simply here to tell you I believe the decision is not in Ozzy's best interest. It's not in the best interest of his peers in the Kaneland school districts. Studies show that inclusive education improves academic outcomes for students with and without disabilities. The National Center of Education Outcomes reports that students with disabilities in inclusive settings outperform their peers in segregated environments in literacy and mathematics. Additionally, a study by the Indiana Institute of Disability and Community found that high school students with disabilities in inclusive settings had improved academic outcomes and higher rates of college enrollment. By outplacing Ozzy, the district is not only sidelining his rights, but also depriving other students of the chance to grow in empathy and leadership. It is important for children not impacted by disabilities to be in proximity to those who are impacted by disability because it helps them to see people with disabilities as indispensable members of our society, even though they may not be typical. If this doesn't resonate with you, I'd encourage you to look into the NORA project and some of the things they're doing within public schools in our area, or you can reach out to me directly. I gave you my email address. Proximity to individuals impacted by disability like Ozzy in turn helps to break down stereotypes and prejudice and creates a more inclusive and welcoming community for everyone. The following comments are why a number of residents in the Kaneland School District believe this is a poor decision. So I've just got 5 points. Children who are not exposed to people, oh wow, yeah. People who are not exposed to people with disabilities develop negative attitudes and beliefs about them. Those students lead to discrimination and exclusion. It's important to teach children that people with disabilities are just as valuable and deserving of dignity. Children who have friends with people with disabilities are more likely to develop empathy and compassion than others. I'm just going to blast through these. Diversity in all forms, including disability, enriches our lives and communities. Children who are exposed to the different kinds of people are more likely to be open-minded and different. There are various barriers. I'm going to skip ahead to the barriers that I think Ozzy's facing.
Mr. Owens?
Duffy.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Duffy. There's another opportunity at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, that probably won't happen. All right, I just don't agree with the decision. I'll email the document to you guys and peruse it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Angie Randall.
He's on page 2, not page 1.
So, no Angie? Okay. Okay. Well, then we will proceed forward. The first item of new business is the public hearing and approval of the 2024 property tax levy for the Kaneland Community School District 302. As a reminder, I'll open the hearing, and Dr. Bogan will share the information on the tax levy. We will then invite the public to comment. We will then invite the public to comment. After public comment, we will close the hearing and discuss as a board. So it is now 6:20 p.m. and I will open the public hearing for approval of the 2024 property tax levy for the Kaneland Community Unit School District 302 to order. Dr. Bogan.
Thank you. I do want to start off with, I know there was an in-depth presentation on October 28th here at the board meeting that I gave. We did not have any changes to the tentative levy, so the same information is being presented tonight. So I do want to recap that. The 2024 2024 tax levy, has been calculated with estimates based on conversations not only with local assessors, but also from data that's been provided by Kane and DeKalb counties. There are a few factors that we do know that are impacting this year's tax levy, and I'll go through those. The biggest one is the final equalized assessed valuation, or EAV, and new construction values. Unfortunately, the timing of that, those actual amounts are not confirmed until the spring, until late April, early May. So I will report back to the board what those final EAV confirmed numbers are, but based on estimated between DeKalb and King County, we are looking at an 18% increase in equalized assessed value. So the value of our property here in Kaneland is increasing by 18%. That marks the 10th consecutive year in a row that property values have continued to rise. This year, new construction between the two counties is projected at $22 million, which is a significant increase. Last year it was projected at 15.6 million, and we ended just under 10. So the total estimated EAV is just over almost $1.3 billion here in the district. That's a good thing in terms of what it does and how it affects our overall tax rate. As we see EAV increase, we do see the tax rate go down because it has that inverse relationship. And so this year, EAV is, or I'm sorry, our limiting rate is actually slightly lower than last year, which means that our overall tax rate is 75 cents lower than it, or I'm sorry, 74 cents lower than it was last year. I think where this is difficult is that individual taxpayers still may see a tax increase in their overall taxes, whether it's the portion that they're paying to the school district or any other taxing body, because even though the tax rate has actually gone down, the value of their property is increasing, and so that does result in more taxes. If everything were equal, right, if we looked at last year's tax rate to this year's tax rate and we said a $400,000 home last year is still $400,000, we would actually see a decrease of about $254 overall, but we know that that's not the case, right? Most homeowners are seeing increases in their property value. Overall this year, we are asking the board to approve a total operating levy of $60,280,000 with a total levy that includes our bond and interest payment, which has decreased slightly from prior year as well, of $72,633,000. Are there any questions that I can answer?
I think now we go to public comment,
Oh,
and then we open it for discussion. So at this time, we'll invite the public to make any comments on the proposed 2024 tax levy, keeping in mind the guidelines stated earlier. And this opportunity is purely to discuss this subject right now.
Good evening. My name is Pat Davidson. I live in Maple Park. One question I have for the board is, what did you get that bond for? What did you get the bond for?
So generally, we don't engage in discussion at this time. I will tell you, when we have the discussion as a board, we'll address it then. Just keeping in line with our public comments guidelines, we won't engage right now.
Not now. When will you?
Once we open for discussion in just a couple minutes.
Okay, fine.
ma'am.
I just want to know what that bond was for.
Sure. Would anyone else like to take this opportunity? Okay. Hearing no further comments, I will close the public hearing at 6:25 p.m. and I will now open the discussion amongst the board members for the approval of the 2024 property tax levy. Dr.
Sure.
Bogan, I'll ask the first question.
Yeah, so the first question, what is that bond and interest levy for? That is specifically to pay off our remaining debt that we have on the bonds that were issued as part of the 2008-2009 Harder Middle School build. And so as of today, as of right now, we have several more years to pay those off. The bonds currently would fall off in 2029 would be the final payment.
Thank you.
So I just got a question, with the gentleman that spoke. So basically with the tax increase, it's the EAV that, it's the increase in value of properties, what's being reassessed by the county, and that's what's increasing taxes, correct? How does that?
That is one way. So, right, like that is one way that taxes increase over time. As your property value goes up, you know, even if the limiting rate is lower and the overall tax rate is lower than the prior year, you still may pay more, right? Because we're not talking about, say, a $400,000 house. We're talking about $400,000 plus 17%, right? So that is a higher payment than that original 400. But we do control, we do have some control in, you know, what we levy. I think what we don't have control over is the assessments. We don't necessarily have control over new construction or that new growth. And so it's really important as a district that we try and capture any of that new construction that we can, because you only get one time to do it. And if you miss that opportunity, you never get it back, and it has a compounding, basically, it creates a compounding issue in the negative for the district. So we do balloon the levy to account for that new growth, and not new EAV growth necessarily, but specifically new construction. So our current property tax base, right? Like everything that we currently have, we are capped at either CPI or 5%. And so this year, CPI is at 3.4%. The last two prior years, it was over 5%. It was like 7.1 and 7.4, and so we were capped at that 5%. We are not capped on that new construction, and so that's why this year you do see an increase, right? It's over 5%, because we're capturing everything that we possibly can on that 22 million of expected growth. Everything else, we use CPI at 3.4 because that's the law. That's what we have to do.
So can you, for those that are out there, can you kind of break that down, how the levy actually affects, you know, the school district? Obviously, if taxes go up, you know, what's going to be portioned to us kind of increases. Is there a simple way to, you know, to kind of break that down where it doesn't look like we're jumping in there?
It's difficult because we do share that information on, you know, what CPI is, what percentages we're actually using. I think where it gets difficult for people, and even when I look at my own tax bill, right, is that I see a higher number, but it is really important that, you know, we look at the assessment and then also what other taxing bodies are doing as well. Because like if you compared a 2023, you know, tax bill to 2024, people will see when they look at Kaneland School District, they will see a lower tax rate. But that doesn't mean the dollar amount that they're paying is less. And it could be because on that specific line, you know, the property is worth more. And then what else are other taxing bodies doing? Did other taxing bodies' rates increase? Could also lead to it. The school district by far makes up, you know, the vast majority of a homeowner's tax bill, right? 70% of it. And so, you know, people can do that breakdown and look at it, but you know, this year our rate is decreasing.
So you did say from 2024 to 2023, it's lower?
It's 74 cents lower than it was in compared to last year.
Per $100.
Yeah, I was going to say
Per hundred,
Yep.
per hundred, okay.
Okay.
Equalized assessed valuation, yeah.
And several of our funds, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Bogan, several of our funds were levying less, like our bond and interest fund.
Correct.
It's a sinking fund, essentially.
Correct,
It's a
yep.
sinking fund type of thing. So as the debt is paid down, bond, principal and interest goes down as well.
Correct, like we're levying less, in that fund this year than we were last year.
Can you tell me, the special education levy amount,
So we are capped in
Yeah,
funds,
yeah.
how much we can
Yeah, I
levy
know.
for, so we do try and, maximize without putting a 10% tax,
Right.
increase on people, so we do try and stay.
Okay.
So with the 5.62% increase, you said we're about 74% less per 100. What does that look like moving forward then? Are we still going down, or,
It will depend
on
on
the
what
overall,
happens with
spring?
overall,
Okay.
next year. And so, I also do want to share, just as a reminder, Kaneland School District, we do rely heavily on our local property base and our local taxpayers. 81% of our district is funded, our revenue is through the local tax base, which is different than other communities across the state may receive more federal or state funding.
State assistance like U46
Correct.
or 131 would enjoy a higher rate of state assistance.
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Any questions, comments? Okay. So hearing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the 2024 tax levy in the amount of $60,280,000 for the operating levy and the amount of $12,353,050 for the bond and interest levy, for a total levy of $72,633,050.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. McCauley?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankiewicz?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. The 2024 tax levy is approved. Okay, the second item of new business is the presentation of the referendum update, staff and community feedback. Dr. Rowling.
I'm going to stand up and present, if that's okay. Stretch your legs out a little bit. So I'm going to go through, as you know, as we discussed a number of times here at board meetings, throughout October and early November, we did a variety of outreach opportunities for staff and for community to talk about referendum needs, get their sense of what they would maybe support and what they saw as our needs. So I'm going to do the first presentation will be on staff, and then we'll go into the feedback from the community. So we did, Dr. Bogan and I, along with some of our other team members, did visit every school in the district to talk to our teachers in smaller groups. We did this by breaking up elementary schools into smaller teams. We met with the middle school by grade, and then with their non-core team, and then high school we did it by department. And so we did collect the qualitative conversation. I know for me, Mr. Chavez took excellent notes, which was very helpful, and Dr. Bogan's an excellent note taker also. So we're going to review that, but we also provided them with a survey. We had a number of respondents, so we'll go through some of those numbers too. So we'll run through the numbers in terms of the questions, but boy, I got to get some glasses. How important do you think it is to improve the facilities, infrastructure, mechanicals in the district? Very important being over here. So I don't think I need to talk a lot about that chart. I think it kind of speaks for itself here. As we look at how do you feel the current state of the facilities impact the learning environment for students,
with negative impact over here. Obviously, this is an area that we see our staff has recognized as impacting the student experience at our schools. When we look at some of the different areas that we discussed in terms of safety and security, classroom renovations, physical education and athletic infrastructure, mechanicals and infrastructure, and then elementary school, the highest priority is these areas here. So as we go through our next level presentation, talking about some of the areas that we might be able to improve safety and security, depending on the projects that we pursue. A lot of other things you can see are not quite as pronounced as safety and security. Obviously, that's something that, as educators in 2024, we put a high amount of priority on. And I think infrastructure is another one that kind of jumps out, especially at the high school. A lot of teachers talked about the, heating, air conditioning needs, some of our other mechanicals, and how that impacts their experience in the classroom. With question number 4, how do you believe improvements will impact the working environment? Again, pretty pronounced that they view that would be a positive impact. It was interesting as we went around the district how even when we were talking to elementary school teachers, many of them would bring the conversation back to Kaneland High School. So even as they were advocating for possible needs in their own buildings, there was still a lot of bringing it back to Kaneland High School and a lot of the needs there. Question 5, how likely are you to support a referendum aimed at improving these things in the district? Again, we felt like initially, right now, we feel like our teachers may be supporting us. We will talk more about that after the board votes, and our KEA partners will have their own discussions, and we'll go from there. But in that initial conversation, that was something that we asked, and that was that response. Then we get into the opportunity for them to provide more qualitative feedback. And so these comments that we got through our survey also lined up with the notes that were taken during the meetings. But if you'd like to provide any details on a specific school or facility, please please give us that information. These are some of the top topics: the high school facility and infrastructure, the conditions of our classrooms falling apart, especially in those older classrooms, outdated science labs, which we have talked quite a bit about. Many of them have not been updated. Some of them I don't think since they were built in 1958. Poor restroom conditions. Talk about health and safety at all of our schools, improving air quality, ventilation and HVAC, mold, mildew, and dust, pest control issues, especially at the high school where some of those older doors, windows create opportunities for our friends in the field to find their winter home. And then roof and plumbing leaks. Many of our roofs, even at some of our elementary schools, are going to hit end of life if they have not already done so. Furniture, outdated furniture that's falling apart. They talked a lot about how it limits their ability to teach in collaborative ways and to get the most out of our students. Furniture equity across the district, making sure that there's some opportunity to refresh furniture, not just based on whether or not you can get a grant or something like that, but having a system around that. Outdoor, obviously the playground modernization is mostly an elementary school thing. The high school did not discuss that. But outdoor landscaping, trying to make sure our buildings look good. There's some other needs for, outdoor. One of the other things we talked about, especially with the PE department, is a need for more accessible green space from the school. They have to walk quite a ways to get to a space that they can use for PE that's outside, that's appropriate. So those will be some things that we'll share in the opportunity for scopes of work in the next presentation. And then what additional information should the school board consider when addressing facility needs? modernizing classrooms. We talked about labs, gyms, libraries, the entryways, safety spaces, accessibility. Some of our spaces, especially in the high school where they're older, are not very accessible. District technology infrastructure, working on our Wi-Fi, having some up-to-date computer labs. When we talk about computer labs in 2024, we're usually talking about specialty use labs, not like when I first started teaching and that was like a place you went to do the internet. Obviously now that's changed, but some of our specialty use labs do need an update. And then smart boards or interactive displays for the classroom to help make their teaching come more alive. Going back to equity on the district, a focus on all of the buildings, not just the high school, and you'll see that in our plan, some opportunities for our elementary schools. This is obviously a fairly new facility, so it's not one that we're focusing on at this time. Disparity in attention and resources allocation, so we'll be looking at, that kind of goes back, I think, to some of the items with furniture, looking at how we make sure that all of our buildings are treated the same. Community trust and transparency, talking about our referendum spending, making sure that as we go out to the community, we're very clear about what it is we're asking for and how that is something that we want to be clear on the projects. We want to make sure that people know what they're voting for. KIPLA funding based on the number of students. So that goes back to the equity thing. We'll continue to look at a variety of equity across our building. PE and athletic facilities came up quite a bit. A lot of our teachers brought up the opportunity for a field house to free up academic spaces. That's something we'll talk about in the next round of presentations coming up this evening. If we were able to do a field house, how we could repurpose the West Gym to create possibly modern career tech ed facilities and some of the downhill effects of that. And then AC in all of the PE and athletic facilities. Currently, none of our athletic and PE facilities at the high school are air conditioned. 2 of our elementary schools are not air conditioned. In fact, one of the PE teachers at one of the elementary schools that's not air conditioned gave me a prize to take home. It was a cone that was somewhat melted from the heat in the summer. So I meant to bring it today, but sorry, it's in my garage. I will make sure to bring it for our next round. And then fiscal responsibility and planning, long-term planning for maintenance. Dr. Bogan, as she's come on, has done a great job of looking at how we're spending our money, doing a lot of work with budget sustainability, trying to find ways where we can be more proactive and less reactive. But that's a long-term process. That's a long-term project. And then a lot of caution against short-term fixes, kind of the do-it-right mentality. So those are the things that we largely saw from our staff. Any questions on that presentation? Yes.
All right, having lived through the whole St. Charles East debacle, or the mold dance there, how bad is the mold problem? And what type of mold?
Yeah, it's not significant. When we get situation of water infiltration or whatever, we do appropriate testing when necessary. We obviously address whatever the leak is as best we can at the time. And
so it would be safe to say we're nowhere near the St. Charles East?
No.
Okay, thank heavens.
Yeah. Mr. Payton's very on top of it with his team.
Yeah.
When we get a report, we remediate as fast as possible.
Yeah, 'cause
So, yeah, we definitely don't want to go down that road.
we have nowhere else to go.
Correct.
We can't just shut down.
Absolutely. Other questions? Yes.
Just clarification, so it was 145 staff filled out surveys, but there was, all teachers were, or what's the number of that you actually talked to? That you were presented to?
I believe the number of staff is somewhere in the neighborhood of 364. Everyone should have been at the meeting, if they were sick or what have you. But those were required meetings, so they weren't voluntary outside of the school day. We took administrative directed time to do that. So every teacher had the opportunity to speak with us. I gave teachers the opportunity to speak with me or Dr. Bogan individually. I'd say probably about a dozen teachers took us up on that, where I got a tour of the science rooms from our science faculty at the high school, which was very eye-opening for me. Had a lot of great conversations with teachers that have established roots about some of the things they'd like to see. So I think we gave staff ample opportunities to provide both survey feedback and the opportunity to speak with us.
Thank you.
So in person, when you had the meetings, there was feedback there as well that was compiled as part of this, and then afterwards, there was the additional survey in case somebody didn't have a chance to get feedback that they could have then followed up with.
Right, and just to be clear, the meeting wasn't us talking at the teachers. It was usually, we tried to keep it to a short amount of conversation from us, and then really, what do you want to talk to us about? And really more free form of, we're frustrated with this leaky thing over here. So we really didn't take up a lot of their time with our jibber jabber. We really wanted to hear from them. Other questions on the staff feedback? Okay, so I think we can jump into community feedback. So throughout that same time, we did a number of community outreach events. We did 5 town halls in various communities around the district. I see some faces in the crowd that may have joined us at one or more of those. We did do one virtual town hall, which actually I kind of found a little awkward. I feel much more comfortable talking to people in person than on a screen. But that was well attended. We did over 15 school events where we went and set up shop, talked to anyone that would talk to us. We had 156 respondents to our survey. We handed out QR codes for people at events. We put one through, we did a Talks with Todd, where they had the opportunity to hear about the project and provide survey feedback, each one of our town halls. So we did try to blast that out as much as possible. We did have individual interactions. We talked with local government officials. And then we have a comments and questions section on the referendum website. So we pulled all this data together, both qualitative and quantitative, and we'll go through that here. So how aware are you of the current state of our school facilities? I think this shows that people, by and large, were fairly aware of the facilities. But there were some people that honestly, I could see it in the crowd, that were shocked at some of the pictures that we showed, especially of some of the dated classrooms at the high school. Rate the importance of the following facility needs. So we'll go through a handful of things. Safety and security, obviously, on the minds of parents and community members also. Classroom updates. Again, the blue is highest priority, and as we cascade down, obviously classroom updates, education is the thing that we do. And so that was something that people really spoke about. PE facilities, this one's a little more mixed. And I think one of the things, again, as we talk about PE and athletic facilities, is what are some of the downhill effects that could come at the high school based on what we choose to do. And that'll be our friend, Mr. Critta, will talk us through that in a little while. Infrastructure and mechanicals, this also resonated hard. I think looking at some of the age of the mechanicals at the high school, looking at the disparity between some of the middle or some of the elementary schools was something that I think resonated with the staff or with the community. Elementary school improvements, I think, were again more of a middle of the road. I think when you compare some of the conditions at Kaneland High School to the conditions of other buildings, I think sometimes people see an obvious difference there. Are you aware that the Harder bonds, which were approved previously, are set to expire in 2029? This is about as even as you can get, so that's something that we'll talk a little bit more about tonight, but the sunsetting of those bonds and some of the options that we might have with that. Which statement best describes your opinion? So without reading all this out loud, basically this is, I don't support anything to keep it smaller, to I'll support a larger tax increase to other. We'll go through what some of those other responses were, you know, obviously people don't want to see taxes increase. I understand that. I pay taxes too and understand some of the struggles there, but those are the responses for that. The other, and this is kind of all over the board. So there were a number of comments that supported a larger tax increase that said do it right and do it now. You know, we'd prefer to see the field house. We prefer to do this once and do it right. So these are some of the comments related to that. Opposition to tax increase. You know, obviously the people tax burden is already too high. We've heard some of that as we've talked through the recent hearing. Cost of living is challenging with the inflation. High tax increases are just not something that the community wants right now. Additional kind of categories focus on responsible spending before the tax increase. So, you know, we heard a lot about budgets, and as we move through January, February, and March, we'll be talking about some of our budget reduction planning with the board. A lot of, you know, cut spending. Not willing to increase my tax portion until the budget is analyzed. So again, Dr. Bogan's been doing a lot of great work on finding efficiencies. We actually voted on some of that tonight. So, so those are things that are in the works. Support for tax increase for specific. So, you know, this comment, I would, you know, we don't want to just do a Band-Aid. Keep the football field where it is. Just to be clear, we are not looking to move the stadium at this time. I know that was in the last plan, but we're not going to move the stadium. The board just approved a beautiful track, and so we're obviously not going to tear that up. And then perimeter security is number one, looking at how we ensure that our kids and our teachers are safe within the school. And then there was quite a bit of conversation about the TIF. You know, people not happy about the board's stance. People not happy with Sugar Grove for the TIF. So again, that's one of those things. You know, the TIF is obviously outside of our control. We've talked about that quite a bit here at meetings also. And then finally, what additional information would you like to share? There are a number of comments about the field house, considering a field house for educational space. It does provide opportunities for non-PE and athletic experiences. Strong consensus on the need for better athletic facilities for our students. We have a robust extracurricular program, and a lot of our facilities are outdated, built in the 70s or 90s when the school was a smaller place. Focus on educational needs over athletic projects. So if you ask 100 people, you get 100 different experiences. Fiscal responsibility. This goes back to cutting spending, a lot of the budget work that Dr. Bogan has been working on, and making sure that we are good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Infrastructure and maintenance concerns, a lot of concern around what happens if one of our boilers goes down. How would we deal with that if it happened this winter? You know, it's gonna be like 7 degrees later this week, so how would we address that? So you know, some people believed in the let's just deal with that rather than some of the other projects that maybe don't appear on the surface to be quite as urgent. And then again, getting back into the TIF, opposition to the TIF, opposition to the stance that the board took. Long-term planning, considering the needs for new housing. We meet with our communities every year to talk about what's on the forefront. Right now, we believe that with some of the proposed changes, we would be future-proof for the foreseeable future. It's hard to project out much more than 5 to 7 years when you're looking at populations. I was working in Huntley when it blew up, and there's just no way to plan for that sometimes. But, you know, based on the information we have right now, we do have the space at all levels to accommodate any of the projected growth. Community trust and past management. Again, this goes into the idea of making sure that we are transparent, both in our financial dealings with Dr. Bogan does a great job of being transparent, trying to make things accessible for our community, but also making sure we do them right, and talk to the community about what decisions we're making and why. So that is a lot of the feedback that we got from our community, getting out and about and spending quite a bit of time with them. What questions does the board have on that?
So you mentioned the TIF multiple times.
I did.
It's a theme.
Yes.
I hear it. I don't know if you guys hear it, but we see it in this data. Specifically, our stance, when you use the term stance, they're referring to our neutral vote
Yes.
at the Joint Review Board?
Yes.
Which again, we didn't really have control over.
Correct.
It's just a recommendation.
And that was, as a general rule, that was something that came up, and that was essentially what we talked about, that, you know, the agree or disagree, right? 'Cause in a town hall about the referendum, I'm not in the position to be debating, but you know, basically the agree or disagree, the board took the stance, we as a school district took this stance so that we could possibly better negotiate with Sugar Grove, which is something that we're doing actually as we speak. So that was the response to that. Some people understood it, some people, you know, still disagreed. But that essentially, yes, is the Joint Review Board vote of neutral, and the rationale of we're trying to position ourselves to be able to negotiate with them for a bigger piece of the pie, I suppose.
Did you see a different opinion on how important the elementary school improvements were on village to village, or were they about the same?
There really wasn't much of a difference village to village.
Okay.
I think the difference village to village was more conversation around the TIF.
Okay.
Surprisingly, Sugar Grove, it was probably the least discussed there. I don't know if it was just because it was the end, that was our last show, so people had already heard it, I don't know. But that was really, I think, I don't know, Dr. Bogan, I think that was, area to area, that was the piece that varied the most, but most of our town halls had the same themes. Okay. I didn't see much of a difference in terms of, you know, whether we were in Maple Park or whether we were in Montgomery.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
Another theme is transparency about us evaluating our budget and, you know, making cuts and stuff like that. And we know that behind the scenes, you're doing a fabulous job, you guys are, and we hear about it as board. But how is there a plan to be transparent of, like, putting it out there, like, yes, the whole budget has been evaluated. We, like, the work that you're doing, unless people come to this meeting or actually read the package, like, they don't know how much that one, you know, that we're saving that much money, and so people just feel that we're doing the same thing every day, and you haven't. You've already cut. There's things that you're saving a lot of money on. So how are we going to make sure people that aren't watching these, you know, streaming live and coming to your,
That's probably something that I would work with Mr. Chavez on, because I think, like, we haven't, and we probably don't do a great job of telling about the wins, right? We do put it, you know, it's out there publicly in terms of these meetings, or like you said, in the board packets that are posted online, but as far as other places, we haven't really put that information, and that's something that we can definitely look to do. In terms of, you know, the budget analysis and what additional information, that will primarily, you know, continue to happen here at board meetings, especially as we move through the rest of December, January, and then into February prior to tentative budget in June. There'll be lots of conversations around that, but we have multiple avenues that we can definitely share that information to or I don't know if it's really a KCN thing, but areas of our website that we can better utilize. I know the finance piece is not always that exciting, but definitely always willing to share that information.
Well, I appreciate that, because even like right now, I would love to see a, show of hands how many people know about the one win on, and unless they actually looked at the agenda that we approved within seconds of being here. Do they even know? Can they say to the number that you just found that we are going to be able to save a year? No, unless people are literally sitting down reading this stuff. And so that's not, sustainable within our community. And so it is a big theme. They want to know that we are doing our due diligence. And so how do we share that with them so they know?
Yeah, so, and I've had some conversations, and just so, for those of you in the crowd that don't know, Dr. Bogan has found upwards of $160,000-ish in savings that are represented on items that the board voted on in the consent agenda today. So that's just a little piece of the puzzle. I know that when we talk about a $72 million budget, that doesn't seem like a lot.
But it is.
There's more coming. We're wrapping up some of the conversations and final details around some of the bigger budget reductions. But one of the things that Mr. Chavez and I have talked about, not just through the referendum, but through just on a regular basis, is creating more short videos to push out through some of our different channels to ensure that we are sharing some of these things with our community, again, not just now, but in the future.
And I want to be clear, it's not for us to go, whoo, high five, way to go,
Right.
You did it. It
Nope.
is about, like I said, the community's asking us to be very transparent, which they feel maybe has not been in the past, or it's been complicated because our budgets are huge, a lot of pages and stuff like that. And for somebody to be able to read that, it was very difficult. So if we can make it more streamlined and make it more available consistently, that would be helpful. So thank you.
Any other questions on any of the feedback? Over the last couple of meetings, we've discussed student feedback, staff feedback, community feedback. Any further questions on that? I will say it was, as a incoming superintendent, it was a great opportunity to meet a lot of people in the community and to get to know some of the faces and hear some of the frustrations or some of the celebrations. So it was a lot of nights, but it was in a lot of ways very worth it. So
Yeah, I think I just want to point out, thank you for all the effort you guys put in through putting those on. I know it was a busy couple months for you guys. I attended a few, and I enjoyed the discussions, and so thank you for that. And also recognize, again, savings. We could have paid a firm to go and do what they did, but they're out there, out being cost conscious, out there working hard to figure out how to get this thing, really just how to progress the district and how to get these facility needs fixed. So thank you for that. Okay, hearing no further discussion, let's see. There's no action necessary for the referendum update tonight, and we will move forward to the third item of new business, which is the Kaneland referendum discussion. Dr. Rowley, don't sit down.
we did that on purpose. We saw a theme. So I'm going to invite Dan Critta from Wold Architects to the podium to lead the beginning part of this conversation.
Thanks, sir. Dr. Rowling. Good to see everybody tonight. I might pull this so I can point at the board because we got some graphics up here that might be a little easier. I'll get out of the way so you can see them. So just to kick things off, a little historical context. The facility master plan started in 2019. Took a pause during the pandemic and then kind of re-energized in 2020. So a full report was issued to the board, I believe it was June of 21. So some time has progressed since that kind of demark of that handoff of a recommendation, or just an idea or proposed master plan to address all the needs in the district. And I think what you've heard tonight and what you'll see going forward on some of these graphics and some of the components of a potential referendum is that there's a lot of alignment from that master plan. Things have not changed. And obviously, if you're not spending a lot of money, the needs are still dangling in the wind, so to speak. So a lot of those challenges still remain. I think you'll see that consistently through the presentation tonight. So district administration worked with our team, and we created 3 phases or 3 I guess, scopes of improvements that address a variety of different needs as you look down the list. And I'll talk about those a little bit further as we get into the detail. But again, that is all stemming from the input that, not just from the community, but from the staff, the students, and all the feedback cycles that have been happening over the last couple months, but even before that, starting last spring, when this process kind of got energized again. A lot of the same comments were starting back then, so there's a lot of consistency among that. The 5 key topics here, and Dr. Rowling went over these pretty clearly, is that critical infrastructure, safety concerns, the long-term needs, looking ahead and not just putting band-aids on things to make sure that you're setting yourself up for the next 20 plus years. And then being fiscally responsible is make sure you're listening to the comments that on both sides of the fence of taxes, no taxes, okay with tax increases. I think that the plan needs to really kind of hit the sweet spot on that feedback. And then avoid a return to existing conditions. In other words, I think what that's saying is just that you're not, that this isn't a short-term fix that we're going to cycle back and 5 years from now we're facing the same story. So I know you probably can't read all this here. I'm going to just highlight some of these things, but these are the challenges, and there hasn't been a lot of change. This is just taking some of the comments that Dr. Rowling talked about that staff were giving us feedback on and getting a little more granular. So on the site, some of the challenges remain. There's drainage and stormwater retention issues. You've reinvested in the track, so the stadium needs to stay where it is. I think it's a wise move and an obvious move. But the facilities around that are outdated. The spectator, the stadium environment is undersized and is also outdated for the events there. Some of the traffic flow and traffic availability or parking availability are challenged on this site, as well as just where pedestrians and buses and parents cross on the site. So there's some improvements that potentially can happen there. Let's see, I'm jumping around a little bit. The maintenance and transportation buildings, they're a bit of an obstacle for some of the development in that on the property. They also probably belong in other places in the district, and we'll talk a little bit about that, as those potentials of can we put them someplace else that are better suited for a long-term district. And then that's pretty much a recap of some of the high-level site items. And I'm looking at the facility challenges. And this goes back to even the tours that we conducted last spring, of making sure that we were showing people some of the things that were challenges, not just when this facility master plan started, but also continue to be challenges in the building. It's a lot of talk about the infrastructure, that's roofs, your HVAC, your boiler, your chiller, your plant. Those items remain to be challenges and potentially could be catastrophic challenges if something goes down, like a boiler or a chiller goes down when you, in those times of those needs. Also, the roof systems are hitting most of them actually have hit their useful lifespan. Not that you can't get a few more years out of them, but they're all kind of coming to a head because a lot of the roofs were done in similar time frames in this building. So over the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see either them phasing out of their lifespan or they're already past that point right now. And that's explains some of the leak issues that you're having at the building. And that issue, although we're focusing on the high school, does apply to some degree at the elementaries as well. Some of the spaces, the science labs are highlighted, but the classroom environments are outdated from an amenity standpoint. Just a sense of pride and sense of belonging. Those spaces really don't cater to that diverse learning style that we see very prevalent in especially in high school education. Having students have a choice to learn a little different ways, different furniture, different amenities, for instance, the teaching media that's in the room, the technology that's in the room, the lighting, all those things play a factor in how successful those environments are. And this building has different degrees, or not this building, the high school has different degrees of outdatedness or obsolescence in those classroom environments. But the science labs specifically have really served their useful life. They're dated from the 1950s, and a lot of those that haven't seen those spaces have that same feel of a 1950s environment. And that does limit opportunities for students, as well as potential safety issues that can arise out of those environments not being up to a modern science lab environment. Other spaces, I think you heard it repeatedly, we heard restrooms. Corridors, there's a tightness about the corridors. There's also some flow issues and some congestion issues. So looking at ways to create some bypasses and maybe some other learning environments that happen along those bypasses could be a solution. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then just the gym environments and the locker room environments being outdated, especially locker room. There's some inequities in those spaces. There's also some ADA compliance issues that they don't meet today's compliance, and that would apply to most of your restrooms as well. Just not having, certainly there's been efforts along the way to bring those into a modern setting, but the durability, just the feel of those restrooms and the lack of full compliance still remain in the building. The student services area are sprinkled around the building. The nurses area, support staff is to consolidate that would be a much more effective way to approach that. And along with that, there's creating a little more secure main entrance point, not just from a standpoint of can you find it on the site, but that has a safety factor to it. But just having the protocol be available to enter the building, go into an office after you've been vetted, and then be staged in the office where you can get into the building. So there's a sequence of events that's really best practice for today for security. And right now that's not able to happen at the main entrance. That's kind of a high level of some of the things that we certainly were showing on tours, and some of the challenges at the high school that the potential referendum or whatever level you decide makes sense will address these at different levels. I'll stop for questions up through the challenge piece here. Yeah.
On the site challenges, I note the easement through there. Is that a perpetual easement?
It is.
It is.
I believe so, and I think there's a potential that there might be another gas main being added to that in the future, but I think it'll stay in the footprint of the easement. Is that accurate?
And
the footprint will grow, but it'll
Go to the east, okay.
not impacting anything that we have.
Okay. And is there any sort of rental based on the easement, or it was just, the easement was just granted? Yeah, okay.
Any other questions? So as we looked at the district as a whole, and the vintage of the elementary schools certainly don't have the same kind of needs. Those buildings, I think the two of them are 26-year-old, and the other two are actually newer than that. So the kind of things that are showing up there are some mechanical needs, unit ventilators at two of the buildings, but also getting AC at two of the buildings in the gymnasium, along with some of the roofs are hitting that 20-plus year mark, or over 20 years, as well as playground improvements. And that's really the flooring. I guess flooring is another one where you get 25 years out of some of the flooring systems, you've gone beyond its normal lifespan. So that's another thing that was brought up in staff and discussions and been highlighted as those are the things you'll see noted here at the elementary schools. The list for the high school, I'm going to jump into a little bigger picture of that, but obviously that's where most of the attention is going. So from this point forward, the next two slides, the next three slides, we've tried to color code these so you can kind of see how the bundling of the scope of improvements was thought through. Most of the things here on the site are in this bluish color, just because that's the camp they fell in. As we talked about, how do you structure this into three different scopes of improvement so we can talk about those individually. So on the site, a lot of attention on the drainage, potentially relocating the maintenance building to behind the Kaneland Academic Center. Obviously the track has been reconstructed, so working with that as a given is certainly the right path. But also there's limitations not having a synthetic field or a synthetic turf field that does bring a whole other set of opportunities as far as community use and the longevity of that field. So that was one topic that was brought up as we talked with staff. Modify the location and expanding the tennis courts. There's you're very limited on having the courts you have. It doesn't allow you to host certain functions, and it also has been detriment as far as the Phi Ed and athletic programs of having only 6 courts on campus. There's a large mound here I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Just taking that mound off site and creating parking there, parking that serves the fields closer to where those activities are, because there is quite a separation from the current parking lot to those areas. But also, it would be additional space for potential student parking too when those events aren't happening. And then reconstructing the bleachers and the stadium support buildings. That can happen with with that field staying in place. It's just more of a timing and phasing challenge, but really addressing that whole area, I guess, south of the stadium with tennis courts and buildings and security, access and press box, all those things would be part of that stadium support features that would be helpful to expand your limitations there. And then on this show, we're just showing at this point as a location. I think in the last planning effort, it was shown at the back of the site, but having a field house, a 4-station field house, to really help improve the physical education opportunity as well as athletics and community use as well, as having that space be a multi-use environment, very flexible, and it would actually replace, and Dr. Rolling alluded to this, the West Gym as well, so it frees up that space to become something different. So we're showing it as a footprint here. Obviously, a lot of the things we're doing are conceptual. We're trying to create some solutions so we can test the what ifs, but they're thought through solutions, but they're not final by any means until the district decides that they want to move forward in this and the community gives it support. We're not taking any of these solutions past a very conceptual level. So just want to let you know nothing's final, but we need something to quantify and something to be able to judge so we can put dollars to it and have something tangible that you can look at and say that makes sense to us. That's most of the site improvements from a kind of high level. Any questions on the site? So the only thing that's in blue here is along with those physical education improvements on the site, we tagged the locker rooms because they're somewhat independent. The locker rooms could be updated without doing a lot of the other improvements in the building. Other things are much more interrelated. So a lot of the things in the yellow, including on the plan, but the notes in yellow, those are spaces that, or improvements that have some kind of intertwining with other improvements. Not exclusively, but to a great degree, they make sense going together, especially when we get to the green items. It talks about a field house and the West Gym repurposing. So I'll kind of leave that to the last of the discussion. But on the site, or I'm sorry, in the building, again, taking care of infrastructure, mechanical roofs is a priority. Creating flexible learning environments and improving classroom environments so they meet the modern curriculum needs and give you some flexibility to adapt and change in those environments and give students a place that's going to look a lot more like when the next chapter after high school, those spaces will be conducive to learning and being in environments outside of that, whether they take a career path or a collegiate path. The other, modernizing the science labs certainly was a high priority, and that was a repeated need that we heard starting back in the master plan and continually through the last feedback cycles. The relocating restrooms and creating accessibility and bringing those up to be more functional and durable environments. Developing a secure entrance for the Fox Valley. There are some concerns that this is a security issue right now, that there's not really a threshold there for those students coming in. So having something that's a little more of a sally port or vestibule that can direct them into the building without having the opportunity to enter the high school. So that's a byproduct of some of that work at the restroom in this corridor area here. Let's see, the repurposing some space here. There's some space in the core of the building that would really offer up some of those learning environments that are different than a classroom, whether it's large or small group areas or independent learning areas. They're not really we're not serving a real valuable purpose right now. They're kind of idling. But to capture that space and create more of a student commons there, so they have that space, whether it's a place to socialize, take a break, learn in a little different way than they do in a classroom. That space has been targeted as an opportunity to accommodate that. Air conditioning in the gyms was also part of that, that yellow development. So the yellow ones are really the first grouping of scope of improvements, just to kind of peek ahead here. Safety and security upgrades by adding an addition for that more secure entry point, but also to be able to expand the office footprint and bring some of those services that are sprinkled around the building, like the nurse, over to create a better student experience and have that a consolidated environment. So it's more efficient, there's more confidentiality, it's just a better environment to have those grouped together. And it frees up some space along the way too to do other things that make more sense in proximity to other functions in the building. A little bit of improvement to the library, but that's more of a default of having to expand the office area a little bit. And let's see, a little bit of repurposing of classrooms as they become for counseling spaces. So the core classrooms in the middle of the building here, there's an area that would really help the counseling efforts and give some meeting space and meeting environments. And I talked about the classrooms and talked about the nursing suite. So everything in yellow here are pretty much those infrastructure and educational environment components that are in that first grouping of improvements. In the green, I talked about locker rooms. That's more of a Phi-Ed related improvement. And that's tagged with a lot of the site work that we talked about in the slide prior. But for the green areas, a couple things. One is the area that currently has the wood shop that potentially be a production lab in the future. But that location is very disruptive to where the special needs program is currently. So taking that area and also making that a more of a consolidated special needs environment and really upgrading the spaces just like you would for the classrooms. So that core area has its own identity. And then taking the production lab and bumping that out of that space into what would be the West Gym. So we can repurpose the West Gym, not just with the production lab, but some of the other functions that you currently have on other places of the building, but also expand that from a career tech standpoint. It's large volume space, very caters to the kind of environment where you need a little more footprint for these spaces, whether it's graphics labs or construction trades, those kind of things need a little bit more space. So whatever you grow into, there's an opportunity there to accommodate some of that career tech, career pathway functions. With that West Gym would be replaced then with the field house. And along with the locker rooms and the fitness area or the weight room that's above that on the mezzanine, those functions would move to a field house location and be support spaces directly next to the field house. So this also takes the Phi-Ed and athletic programs and really puts them into one core area of the building instead of having those also sprinkled around the building and disconnected throughout the high school. I think that pretty much covers the improvements. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that as you look at the green, one of the opportunities there would be our current graphics lab is actually located in the Fox Valley Career Center section of the building. Moving that into the West Gym would allow us to move other Fox Valley programs into the graphics lab, which would help facilitate that secure entrance. And I think that's probably, I know that's something that we've heard from the staff. As you may or may not know, we have students attending Fox Valley from a variety of high schools in the area. And so it leads to the possibility of non-Kaneland students easily accessing the high school in general. So I think that's an important thing to consider. And then again, repurposing that West Gym opens up other spaces, moving our graphics, moving production, moving culinary, possibly creating a set-aside space that's more conducive for our Kaneland Crier newspaper program, opens up other spaces around the building to help future-proof us for potential growth too, creating more education spaces. So that was part of the vision there. We did meet with department chairs at the high school when we started to rethink about what we could do with the West Gym, and that was something that we spent a good hour or so talking with the department chairs, and that was what they saw as it's a great opportunity there too, is to turn that west gym into a CTE, College Career Tech Ed, space, so just wanted to share that.
With the west gym, because it's 2 stories, right? I mean, so would you potentially break that into 2 stories worth of space for classrooms, or, you know,
I think
labs or something like
there's
that?
some cost prohibitiveness to going a second story, because then you introduce ADA and some other challenges by going second level. But I will say that a lot of those environments that are more career tech oriented tend to take advantage of that extra space. Whether you could have a mezzanine and a production lab that gives you some storage space in that environment. So there's a way to capture some of that space, but I think a lot of times we'll find that we're doing a story and a half to 2-story volumes for a lot of that anyway. Any other questions or comments? I'll move to the slide that kind of tries to put a ribbon around these groupings. So in that scope 1 environment, which is everything that you saw in yellow through those slides, that's really the focus on the infrastructure, mechanical systems, and roofs. And then the second component of that would be the learning environments, restrooms, student services, and secure entrances. The interrelated work there are some things that are interrelated that I won't get in a lot of detail on that, but that's one of the pieces that drove how we grouped these is, if I touch this, do I need to touch something else to do that? So the work that on the far side here talks about the needs that are addressed by these improvement gestures, and for that anticipated project cost, that's all in cost too. Just want to give a quick overview of that. Project cost is your all-in cost. It's fees, testing, furniture that goes along with space that you're renovating. It's intended to capture everything that goes along with that improvement. It's different than your construction cost, which is your trade costs or base bid costs to do the work, but the soft cost part of that is also included. So these represent everything it needed to do the work. And that usually runs 25 to 30% depending on the type of scope of work.
Are these current numbers, or, because I'm having trouble remembering what the numbers were last time?
These are, yeah.
Okay, so these are updated with current costs.
And if you recall, since we were coming out of the last planning effort from the referendum, we were coming out of the COVID environment and some really high escalation numbers. So these have now been updated to represent kind of climbing out of that, and also looking forward. So we're looking out kind of a midpoint of construction here so we can escalate thoughtfully to make sure that we're not looking at a snapshot in time, but we're looking at what are the bid market going to be, best we can tell, you know, the crystal ball of being out about 1.5 years from your referendum. So the second grouping, it's scope 2, that's gets into solving some of the Phi Ed environments around the campus and athletic from the site standpoint. It also umbrellas the playgrounds at the elementary schools. The second part of that is the locker rooms, and then relocating the maintenance and transportation buildings along with the bus parking lot would go with the transportation building, and right now that would be at Harder Middle School.
Has there been numbers, or can you quantify what that's? I know a lot of parents, you know, concerns are bus rides are a lot longer, so if we do have it centralized, we've always wanted to get it centralized. Can you speak to, like, what's the benefits of that besides just shorter bus routes, but also costs too?
Yeah, so I think overall, right, like, there is the idea that locating the transportation department here does cut down on many of our route times sort of automatically, because it's more centrally located, not necessarily in terms if you look at the district map, but when we look at overall population of where people live in the district, it's much more centrally located, it's much closer, so that is a cost. By shorter routes, you by default have, you know, less fuel costs, which tends to say, well, if you're not putting as many miles on your buses, you know, does that decrease maintenance costs, things like that. What we haven't done at this point is say, okay, scenario, if it was here, what does that route look like? Okay. That is a huge undertaking, and so that would be part of the process. I think if we decided, hey, we're going to move it, that would be part of our planning and what we would look at to get, you know, those estimates. But we do anticipate not just the shorter routes, but savings on fuel, savings on just maintenance for our buses. You know, fewer miles, you can extend the life of your fleet a little bit, so not having to buy as many buses so frequently. And then also just the cost, right? If you have shorter routes, you know, it takes less personnel to do that, so.
Thank you.
Could you guess, I know you can't throw a number out, but can you?
Try.
You don't, not even a percentage or what you think that would do? I mean,
It's such a complicated, like,
I mean, I know
routing
what
is
you
the
said.
same thing.
Yeah,
complicated.
I mean, like you said, if you're like, you know, 10% savings, 20%, something like that, I mean, you don't even want to throw a number
I
out.
wouldn't even throw a number out there, no, because I will be held to that
I
number.
know.
and Then I'll be for sure wrong.
But it would benefit us.
We do believe that there would be a benefit.
And it's a safety. Again, we keep focusing on safety, and parents are asking for shorter bus routes, and so it's a huge safety, whatever the cost is for that. So, you know, parents are going to identify that as it's a huge win, too. Thank you.
I did mention, but in the first grouping would also be the infrastructure at the elementary schools. I think I've overlooked that. So if the work here was done on the site, the locker rooms, a lot of the maintenance and transportation shift, that has its own price tag of $30,830,000. So cumulatively, if you did scope 1 and scope 2, we're at 79,000, just over 79,000, or 79 million. I'm sorry. Took some zeros off that.
We'll take that number.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So I got a question. So what percentage of the funding would actually go to the high school? And of that, how much of the high school, what percentage would you say is actually the infrastructure, the classrooms is being renewed compared to like the old bones still there?
Yeah. So anything on the plan in yellow is getting touched to some level. From a dollar standpoint, and I'm going from memory, I believe at the elementary schools we had $4 or $5 million set aside for those infrastructure improvements, including playgrounds. I'm going from memory here, but I think it was in that range. That would be in that first scope category. From that point forward, just about everything in the blue and the green is dedicated to the high school.
Which is, I know you have a lot of it, it's the exterior, it's the fields and whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the actual high school itself, just because it's so old. And I'm just curious, you know, I know there's, from the map, a lot of things are gonna be done, but based on the funding that you have put in the scope towards it, what would be left? I mean, as far as, it's still the old bones from the original.
Sure.
And then what would, you know, what from that is dire need to be done kind of thing?
Well, this look ahead was to try to capture things that would be your next 15 to 20 years of priorities. Now, I will say that one of the opportunities that doing something like a bigger swing of improvements like a referendum, it frees up the nickel and diming that you get done on your annual maintenance. So you would still have those issues.
Yeah.
For instance, there's other rooftop units that aren't in here at the high school that are coming due in 10, 12, 15 years. That would be the way to proactively look at more of a preventative program, saying, hey, this is coming due, let's put money in year 5 so we can spend that money on those targeted improvements versus a wholesale swing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So pretty much like the majority of the structure internally, the roofing and exterior would get taken care of.
Yeah, your envelope would be really pretty renewed as far as, I mean, obviously there's tuck pointing and there's minor stuff, but those are the kind of things that fall into a maintenance program.
Okay.
In the last grouping then, that's certainly a bigger ticket group, but that's really driven by the field house, repurposing that west gym, a career tech, as more of a career tech headquarters, and then tackling that special education suite, so to speak, so that could be a more effective environment, an updated environment, and move the production lab or wood shop out of that area so it doesn't become a detriment to the learning environments there. So that's all umbrellaed in that green area, and for that amount of work, it's $60 million, which is the bulk of that is the field house. If you did everything, scope 1, 2, and 3, it'd be at 140 million, just over 140 million. Any questions on the bundling or?
I I don't know if I asked you this, but I know we've talked about this because I've talked to people in the community where they want to see what the actual breakdown is. Is there a diagram as far as like a calculator we can set up to go, what is this going to cost me tax-wise if we do 30 million, 70 million?
Yes, so we'll actually, I'm going to invite him up in just a second, but we do have a representative from PMA that's going to go over the financial impact of all of these that we've discussed today, and hopefully that will answer those questions and then also bring some clarity.
Because there are some options in there too that would drive what that would look like, depending on the direction that we're taking.
Yeah. I mean, just for the record though, because that was a big thing. I know this is all grouped together and it's kind of saying, hey, this is yellow, this is blue, green. If we get to that point or whatever and we say, okay, we're going for green, we're going for it, 140, let's go. Will we be able to put out to the public or to all of us an itemized kind of listing of where all of that spend is actually going to go? Based on the yellow, we're going to say this 2 million's here, this 5 million's here, this 6 million, and with a little bit of context and detail to it. So if we're upgrading the science labs for, let's call it $12 million, here's kind of the punch list of what's going into this, right? Here's some of the new technology that the science lab's going to get, new desks and beakers and whatever cool science words I don't know, right? And all this stuff. Right, and then this is what's going to go over here, and this is how we're going to move this, just so we can show that, again, from a transparency level, but also so the public understands that we're not just saying, hey, we're taking 140 million, we're going to figure out what to do with it, don't worry, we got this, you know?
Yep.
So they fully understand, and the expectation is then set, so when they come back to the school, it's called 1.5 years or 2 years, and they go to the science lab, all of that stuff is actually there. The teachers can verify, yes, everything they said we were going to get, this is what we got.
Yeah, I'll answer your question in two parts.
Sure.
So we have done very detailed takeoffs of areas, and what we typically do for science lab renovations is we'll take a metric of what do we see in the marketplace for a science lab. And they're basically a gut job. You know, we're going to try to save the walls and the footprint of those areas, but we're taking everything out and modernize it. That's how we're treating this in these numbers. So what we've done is we've created, I guess, line items to build this budget that are more detailed of science labs are getting fully renovated, modern day. The second part of the question about getting into some of the minutia, if we're gutting that, we're assuming there's new furniture, new equipment, all those things are in there. So we're using metrics, but we haven't laundry listed exactly what's going to be in that space. I think a little bit of that is assumed. When you get into things like classroom remodeling, though, we have gone in and said this would include new floors, new ceilings, new lighting, door and furniture and paint. You know, that's kind of like a refresh of a classroom. So we have got to that level because then we can itemize those a little bit, come up with a cost per square foot, and say each classroom gets this much to be able to do that. The older ones are a little more, newer ones are a little less. So that we have done that. Rolling that out, I think we'd want to be sensitive to dragging too much into detail.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
But we certainly can have that.
Speaker and whatever the case may be. I'm not trying to get down to that granular of a level, but something that does definitely represents what you know, a science classroom remodel would look like, you know, and some basic, you know, five bullet points or something like that.
Yeah,
versus
we'll probably package it to be a little more understandable, but that's what what's fed into these numbers. If that information needs to be presented, it's certainly available.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Otherwise, I'll hand off.
So the second part of this presentation, I'm going to invite Robert Lewis from PMA to come up and review the referendum scenarios for everyone. And so I won't steal his thunder, but this is a really exciting part for me. So,
yeah, you got 3 minutes, let's go.
Let's go. Sorry, we'll get the presentation back up. And then it was right after the scenarios. Here, I can scroll.
Well, I can scroll, I just wanted to, so I didn't have to always turn around.
Perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
just scroll to that.
There you go.
Perfect.
thank you. Is this close enough, or do I need to hold it? Okay. Well, thank you for having me here tonight to present to you. And the first slide in the presentation we begin with is to look at your statutory debt margin. In the school code, it sets forth the maximum amount that any school district can borrow according to a formula that is based upon your equalized assessed value. As a unit district, that's 13.8% of your assessed value. So if you take I'm looking at this first column of numbers, you take the 1.1 billion, multiply it by 13.8%, you get 152 million. Subtract the amount of principal outstanding, and you get to 118 million. And then you can go across that blue row, and you can see how that number increases up to 144 million in just a couple of years. As your EAV continues to grow, we assume 2%, and you continue to pay down principal. Both those factors increase your legal debt margin. Now, that doesn't mean you can just go out and sell $144 million. You have to have permission under some portion of the school code to do so. And for you, that would likely be as a referendum bond. And the law was recently changed, by the way, in the event that a school district was having an issue with its statutory debt margin, it could conduct a hearing about that and be exempted from its statutory debt margin. The reason why they made that change, if you go to the school code, there's pages and pages of school districts that have sought out exemptions or exceptions, and this General Assembly finally decided, why don't we just make this available to all school districts as long as they hold this hearing and publish certain information. And the reason why that was happening is, quite frankly, the cost of construction has increased more quickly than the cost of the value of EAV within the districts. You know, this is a formula that was created back in the 1800s and just no longer really works in today's environments. So instead of adjusting the formula, they just create an exemption that becomes available. Now, under the scenarios that we're looking at tonight, any of the scenarios that we have under consideration would fit within this formula by the time you would want to sell the bonds anyhow. But I know that's been an issue with past times that you've talked about referendum, is this statutory debt margin. Okay, the next slide is a summary of your outstanding debt service. So debt service is a combination of your principal, interest, and accreted value. And so the bond payment has been flat the last several years. You were going up gradually each year for several years, and then you did some refinancings. We cut off those increases and then kept it flat. And the benefit of that is then as the district's tax base increases, the tax rate to support your debt has gone down over time. So you see the table that's off to the right on that slide. It shows that your tax rate from levy year 15, just to support your debt, has gone from $1.50 per $100 of EAV down to $1.13. And that's because of the district's strategy to keep the bond payment flat, instead of targeting a certain amount of growth. Any questions on that? So the next slide, and I apologize for those of you in the crowd, these numbers are going to be way too small for you to read, but I'll summarize it. So we looked at the three different amounts that was provided to you and looked at two options for each amount. We looked at one where you would finance it and layer it on top of your current debt payments. And then when your old debt matured, then we would start paying off more of the principal at that time. And we also looked at what if we did the smallest possible restructuring to keep that overall payment the same. So before I go through these numbers, let me just illustrate one of the scenarios looking at the graphs. So here is a scenario where you would sell the bonds, and these would just be interest payments until you get to here, and then you're paying the principal and interest. So you're 3 years, so essentially by the time the voters approve a referendum, you would be 3 years away from all your debt being paid off. But that means during those 3-year period, there would be an increase in the bond levy until the old bonds were paid off. And then the second scenario we did for each amount was to restructure just a component of your current payments in dark blue and extend those payments to these 3 years and then fill in the new amount represented by the green. And that made room for these partial payments on the referendum bonds for those 3 years. So there'd be no increase in the current bond levy. So if I go back to the summary, then And when we did the bond scenarios, we didn't assume all the bonds were issued at once because you don't need all the proceeds at once. And so we got information from the construction team and utilized that to come up with we'll call it a draw schedule, when you would need the money, and tried to issue the bonds in an amount that would provide that funding when you needed it, also paying attention to the rules from the IRS. You know, what does the IRS have to do with this discussion? Well, when you issue bonds, you sell them on a tax-exempt basis, which means your investors don't pay taxes on that interest, so you're getting a subsidized interest rate from the federal government. Well, that comes with some strings attached to it, because the federal government has the goal of providing this subsidy to you, but they also want to minimize its use. Well, how do they minimize the use? Well, they want you, if you sell tax-exempt bonds, to have a reasonable expectation to spend 85% in 3 years. So that's something that factors into the larger scenarios. And then there's other rules that come into play on the amount of investment earnings, and this is really beyond the scope of this conversation. But if you get closer to the time you actually sell the bonds, we want to talk about the arbitrage rules. Let's not get into those today. Now, okay, so if you look at 48.7 million, the first scenario would increase taxes for a $300,000 home on a monthly basis by $8 in 26 and another $8 in 27. Because if you remember when you looked at the graph, we don't hit the full impact in the first year. It goes up another portion the next year. And then we looked at if you restructured it, and the second set of numbers here, there would be no increase in the monthly payment that people are paying because we're keeping the bond payment the same. Now, because you are restructuring, that does increase the amount of debt service you pay back over the term of the bonds in that scenario, but our current estimate was $2.3 million. Then when you look at this, and I want to talk more about that increase here in a moment. We'll come back to that because this comment I want to make applies to all three scenarios. For the $79.5 million, let's go to those graphs. So you get a little bit more of an increase because you're borrowing more. You have the same sort of increase here and then a bigger increase here. Again, just because we're providing the funding that meets the time, when you need those dollars. And then you layer in the payments back here on the principal component. That's 78 or 79.5 million. In this scenario, we restructure those payments, again, to keep them the same. We kept the term as constant here, so we kept it in 2040, and that just made these bars higher than they were in the prior slide. So you can see they're just under 10 million here. Here they're closer to this, call it $9 million. And that's due to the restructuring. Now in that scenario, your increase would be $8 a month on a $300,000 home in the first year, and the second year would be another $13. And then that would disappear when the old bonds mature, and then it drops down. If you did the restructuring to avoid any increase for those first 3 years, that restructuring would cost $2.9 million, is the estimate. And then in the final series for the largest amount, the 140 million, you see you get a much larger increase here because you end up having to sell almost most of the bonds to meet the funding needs by the time you get to the second year. And then we kept the payment exactly the same as it was before. So there is no decrease in this one. It keeps the taxpayers paying exactly as they did before after these 3 years. And if you restructure, I'm sorry, the scale of the axis changed in these scenarios because this had to go up here. So it's 20 million here and it's 16 here. So keep in mind the visual will be a little different because the axis changed. They usually try to keep this constant. So here you kept the payment the same. There is no subsequent decrease, but there is no increase. So the increase for this scenario would be $8 a month for the first year on a $300,000 home and another $28 a month in that second year for the $300,000 home. If you restructure, there would be no increase, but the cost of restructuring increases on this scenario to $22.5 million to restructure the debt and push that out. Now, those dollars are in future value in the sense that you're paying them back over time. And the cost of doing the restructuring really depends on how you frame your decision on going to referendum or not. If your choice is, do we go to referendum next year Or do we wait for the debt to get paid off because we don't think the voters will support any sort of increase based off the survey you had? Well, that time waiting is going to increase the cost of those projects. You already experienced that from the last referendum to now. Some of those projects you were considering before now cost more than they did because of construction cost inflation. So if you think the projects are something that you want to pursue, but the timing's just off because of the increase, well, if you wait another 3 years, that 144 million might be, you know, Dan could give a better guess than I would, but if it was going up by 5 or 6% per year, which seems to be the case recently, the increase in the construction cost might outstrip the cost of doing the restructuring. So you got to really weigh that out then as you're deciding. Is the choice between doing the referendum with or without an increase? And if you think an increase just isn't going to be possible, and so then the choice is doing a referendum now with a restructuring or doing a referendum later without a restructuring, but having those projects cost a great deal more, it may be more cost effective to do it now with the restructuring than to wait and have to borrow more. And you can't compare the cost of the construction to the cost of the increased debt service on its face value. So if Dan were to say, well, that 144 million, I keep thinking I'm saying it wrong, 140 million project, it's not 140 million in 3 years, it's 150 million. Well, on the face of it, you may say, okay, well, it's $10 million more if we wait, it's $22 million more to restructure, but that $10 million number is a present value number up front. The $22 million is over time. So those might be actually, on a present value basis, very similar to each other. So that's just food for thought we want to give you as you look at the options that you have before you, because the cost of the restructuring may seem to be a disadvantage, especially with the larger amount. I mean, for the smaller amounts, it's not that much more. It's with the larger amount, it gets considerably higher, that balancing those out, the construction costs and the increase in debt service is probably a worthy exercise. So the last slide I have, just recap, I guess I already made this at the beginning, about the statutory debt limit, in that you would have that option available for you if you were to pass referendum. You know, so for example, if the EAV assumption wasn't what we thought it was, and you can only do 135 million, you could take advantage of this exception if you needed to by conducting a hearing, then you'd be able to sell all the bonds. Previously, you'd have to go to the General Assembly to seek permission. You no longer have to do that. And then the appendix just has additional detail that was there for you in case you had other questions that I didn't cover in the body of the presentation. So any questions on the tax impact or the cost of restructuring or anything else related to your debt?
So to summarize, we can keep our debt the same, add the referendum, increase if it gets passed, if it gets passed, increase what people pay on a monthly and yearly basis. We can restructure our debt, pay the 2 million, you know, plus or minus for the smaller numbers, the 22 million for the bigger numbers. Keep the payment, the out-of-pocket cost for me, the homeowner, level for a longer period of time.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
And the cost of that is that 2 million, which is in today's dollars. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that 2 million will be worth Lord knows what.
Well, no, I mean, that 2 million is not in today's dollars. That's over the life of the payback.
Okay, so that takes into account the time value of the money.
Yeah. So if you're going to compare that $2 million, that's over the life of whatever, it was 15 years in the smaller scenarios and 20 years in larger scenarios. That's over the life of that. So if you're comparing that to an increase in construction costs by waiting, well then you have to PV that number back to compare it to the increase in construction costs.
Yeah, the offset's the increase, or the potential for increase in construction
Right.
costs and the project costing 22 million more.
Right.
Later on.
You know, one of the things that we talked about the administration after, you know, sort of a postscript to the last referendum. You know, last referendum, we might have had like 5 years of a higher payment, and then we were telling people, hey, it's going to decrease after that. So it's almost like a 5-year surcharge, if you will, on your debt. I think it was very confusing to people that you're going to be paying more for a period of time, but then you'll pay less later on. And so it's another benefit of the restructuring. I think the message is cleaner for people to say that you're going to be paying the same. You show them this graph. Versus you're going to be paying a little bit more for a few years and then paying less later on, unless you do the bigger amount and then you're just paying the same.
So, I don't know, just a little bit of feedback. I was just at the III a couple weeks ago, and I talked to a couple districts that have passed large referendums. They were unsuccessful previously, but because of this scenario and applying the same concept, they were able to pass major projects, large amounts, with no impact to the, I mean, on your monthly budget, on your annual budget, no impact to the homeowners, to the taxpayer.
Well, I think that's the big thing, right? Because nobody wants their taxes to go up. And only 50% of people that were surveyed actually knew that their taxes might come down in 3 or 4 more years.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, I don't think anybody actually believes their taxes will ever go down again in their lives.
Right.
Let's be honest. I've never expected a tax reduction on my property taxes since I've owned a home. That's just not something that I would assume is ever going to happen. Once I got the money's there, right? Why are they going to go backwards? So if we can pass a referendum for $140 million, get all of the things that we need, all of these huge CapEx, especially the infrastructure projects done, plus some restructuring of the high school, plus take care of the elementary school, plus do all of these things and make, to really, again, get us into this century, and create a larger draw to the district. And on top of that, tell people, hey, listen, what you're paying in property tax today is not going to change. It's not going to go up because of the referendum. Your property taxes won't go up because we're going to have restructure it this way so everything just stays level set. We're just going to continue paying what we're paying today. It's what it is. I mean, that's.
I agree 100%. The only thing I'm concerned about is I think when you talk to people, I don't know if they listen to that and believe it, right? I think they say, well, you said that, but that's not true. So I don't know how you overcome that.
I don't think you can, really.
Yeah, I almost think the ones that have that,
Yeah.
they're already
It is
set
what
on
it is.
that concept are married to it.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're going to change them.
So I guess do we have enough people that aren't in that camp?
That's what we hope for.
Yeah.
So we find out.
I think too, we need to consistently share the message of this, right, and the financial impact. And so, depending on what the board chooses, then we would know, okay, which message are we sharing? Is it 140 million and there's no increase on the bond caps?
Well, and I think as much as you've educated all of us, I think educating the community too. Again, like you said, yes, your $300,000 houses, you bought it at that, but now 10 years later, it's worth this. So yeah, your taxes are always going to go up. So not to look at that as a reflection of us. It's not, oh, well, we had this beautiful school and we've done all these changes. Oh my gosh, my taxes went up. It had nothing to do with us, and to educate people what that means. And I know you've talked to people one-on-one to continue to do that and, just have that communication out more.
I think to touch on that, I think simplifying the message, and I appreciate all the information you provided today, but we've had this for a little while, and I've looked over it, and I understood it, I talked to people, and I read up on it, and so now I feel like I'm educated to a point where I feel comfortable with making the decision. But to your everyday Joe, I think simplifying the message is vital because, to your point, they're never going to trust us, and so at least if we can, give them the nuts and bolts.
When we craft the question, can we say in the question, this will cost you nothing?
No.
I don't think so.
Just a reminder.
What is the worst case scenario if we do sell it, it's not going to change, but then it does? What can happen? Is there any way that it could cost increased taxes or what?
Yeah, so, well, like in this scenario, it goes out it's phased in, so its final payment's about maybe 21 years away. So let's say something happens to the market and interest rates go up 1%. Well, that means you would pay more, but under the school code, another change that's made in the law is 20 years is no longer the maximum repayment term. It can now be up to 30 years. So the choice the board would have is come out and say, okay, well, interest rates are higher than we originally anticipated. And we build a cushion in these, by the way. So you would either keep the footprint the same, and that would increase the payment, which would contradict the message. Or you could say, hey, it's going to go up a little bit, but if we just add 2 more years here at the end, go to
2050, we can still keep the payment the same, but now we're gonna be paying it back over 2 more years. You would have that option, where you didn't have that option a few years ago because you're limited to only 20 years.
Okay, so you're saying the term extends out, you can have a fixed rate, or the bond is played by the market? I mean, how is the rate?
The rate is fixed, it's just
Okay,
that
so it is
it's
fixed,
not
you can push
fixed
it.
until you sell the bond. So like
Okay.
if you go through a referendum campaign, we crunch all these numbers, the voters approve it, and then 6 months later you sell bonds and interest rates are higher than what we estimate, because we always have to estimate. That's the situation I'm talking about. But once you sell the bonds, the rate's locked in, it's fixed, it doesn't change. So your risk is until, from the messaging to when you actually sell them. Yeah, we put an extra 0.5% when we ran this analysis on November 14th. And in today's world, it's probably an extra 0.75 to 0.8%, because interest rates have come down since we ran this analysis.
So could you guesstimate, I mean, could you, I mean, the taxpayers are looking at this, and, I mean, I wanna sell it, it's not gonna go up, but, I mean.
It shouldn't go up, because we have this, like if we were doing this and I needed all 20 years and the school code hadn't changed, then it'd be hard to say that it wouldn't, we can control it so it doesn't go up. Now, since you have these additional years available, if interest was higher than, you'd have to go up a lot from what we've assumed here, then we could always push it out just 1 or 2 more years, so then it ends up being a 23-year payback. You still have plenty of room left under the law. It's not ideal to push it out, but if the goal is to maintain the commitment to the taxpayer, then that's how you do it.
Okay,
Right.
that makes sense. Okay.
But, most of the time in my career, that cushion has been more than enough to cover it, so you actually come in better than what you told the taxpayer.
Yeah, the 30 years, yeah. So it'd be it's a safe sell. We're gonna stay the same, you're not gonna pay.
Yeah.
We just have to, if something happened, restructure it down.
Yeah, and that's the same message I think you referred to. It was Wheaton 200 and Indian Prairie 204 who were right there at paying off their debt. They made similar commitments to their communities, and you have to do it on a good faith effort with what interest rates are. And the difference between those two communities and yours is they were right there. Wheaton is just making their last payment. Indian Prairie had like a half a year left, and then theirs is gone. Yours is still 3 years away. But the difference there is that, okay, well, do we wait until it's all paid off like those 2 school districts? Yeah, but by waiting, it's going to cost more to do it, so it would I can't say with certainty, and Dan would have more input on that waiting would cost more than the cost of the restructuring.
Makes sense.
So procedurally, obviously we're not making a decision tonight, this is purely informational. But essentially we have a week, correct? So we got a week to marinate on this, ask our questions, and then we got to make a decision a week from tonight. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have to file with the county by January 13th. Fun fact, our first board meeting of 2025 is January 13th. So I don't think they're going to wait up at the office for us. So we do need to make a decision next week. I would say if there are pieces that the board needs, pieces of information, if we get those now, we can get those out to you as soon as possible. We have time set aside this week already booked in our calendars to do any fact-checking, additional information that the board might need. So I'll open
By
it to that.
next week, does that also mean that you're gonna have the actual question framed?
Yes. We already have sample questions written.
That's right.
For the board to look at.
I read my homework, I promise.
So, and I will say the recommendation of the referendum team in terms of scope of work would be to go all in. I think it fixes the significant needs. It opens up room in the high school to not just future-proof us from growth, but career tech ed, especially right now, is a huge field in K-12 education. It allows us to give our kids the educational experiences to put them on par with every other kid in Illinois. And provides for some safety aspects at our high school, and really gives the community and our kids the facility that it deserves for what should be the flagship of our district.
And it also helps with, like we said, there's not much going on at the middle school here. It's the newer one, but those kids all get
Yep.
bused here. You know, so the transportation changing that does impact them in a big way.
Yep.
So.
I think for the overall, and the ability to, you know, like the field house, for example, can be a community space.
Mhm.
You know, it can be used by youth club athletics. It can be used by for large community events. It provides an opportunity for Kaneland High School to become a center of the community for a variety of things, not just school district events.
Well, the financial benefits Mr. Critta alluded to, and I didn't even think about this before tonight, but if we do it right the first time right now, that allows us to, almost the way I see it, reset and get on a solid maintenance schedule so we can take care of projects ahead of time and yeah, I mean, from a budgetary standpoint, that would be huge, right?
We talked quite a bit about that in the town halls of, unfortunately right now we're in a situation where a lot of what we do in terms of maintenance and facility is reactive. We have a leak, we fix it. We, you know, the boiler goes down, we spend a lot of time and effort and money dealing with those situations that come up that we cannot predict. We believe this really flips that script, allows us to be proactive, to use that money in more proactive, more maintenance style of approaches rather than waiting for the thing to happen and spending a lot of, and Mr. Payton does an amazing job of keeping our buildings in the best shape that he can, but when you're dealing with the boiler that's older than, you know, we hadn't even landed on the moon when that thing was put in. I think that, you know, those opportunities allow his team to then go out and do some of these things on a proactive scale that makes us much more budget conscious too, and we're using the money the taxpayer money in a much more efficient and organized way.
Any other immediate questions or discussion? Obviously, we got a week to think about it, so.
And we will need a vote at next week's meeting. I would just add that if anybody has any questions, please reach out to myself, Dr. Bogan. We'll get that turned around to the whole board as fast as humanly possible.
Hearing no further discussion, there's no action necessary tonight for the referendum discussion. The fourth item of new business is the Kaneland Ignite Personalized Learning Academy for grades 9 and 10 update. Dr. Rowland.
So I'm going to turn it over to our Ed Services team to go through this. I believe Ms. Garland will be doing most of the talking, so the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I promise you my numbers are not nearly as complex, so you can relax a little bit here. But we are just back to provide an update from the last time that we talked about KIPLA was July of 2024, and one of the things that the board had requested was that we dug a little bit deeper into more proactive ways to find out what is the interest level, not just for 9 to 12, but across the district in having that personalized learning experience. And so a lot of the actions that we went ahead and initiated were based on that request of the board to try to be a little bit more proactive in that recruitment. So what we'll talk about, whoops, I think we're both advancing. Can you maybe just scroll up to the other way? There you go. So I'll share just a few of those proactive steps that we went ahead and did. We've done a lot of in-person nights over the last several years. We did introduce a virtual experience just because we know how busy all of the families are. So we did continue with those in-person informational nights as well as added that virtual one. We also did discuss at the Ed Service level, came up with the concept of creating a student survey and really putting an opportunity out for students to self-reflect on their own propensity to seek personalized structures within their own learning. So we did survey students in grades 2 through 9, and it was a 12-question survey that asked them to self-reflect around tenets of personalized learning. So the degree to which they seek choice in their own learning, the degree to which they advocate for their own learning needs and reflect on their own learning needs. After we got all of the results of those student surveys, we looked through those and identified students who answered 10 of those 12 questions with an often or always, and 0 of the questions with a never, seeking those types of opportunities. With those results, we did share those with Harder Middle School and Kaneland High School counselors so that they could share that information out to teachers, wanting to make sure that teachers were aware if you have a student who self-identifies as seeking personalized opportunities within the classroom, whether that be at Ignite Academy or even within any of our Kaneland schools, we wanted the teachers to be aware of that. We also did email parents letting them know that their child had scored above the cutoff on that survey so that they were aware not only of their students' own desire to seek personalized experiences, but that making sure that they were aware of the scope of opportunities available in Kaneland to seek those opportunities. We did hold parent coffees at all of the elementary buildings as well as Harder Middle School, giving parents the opportunity to come in and ask questions, again, about Ignite Academy specifically, but about personalized learning across the district. Just what does that look like? How does it vary from school to school? And so we had some nice attendance at those. We did, again, reach out directly to students. 8th and 9th grade students within their homeroom were able to watch a video about Kaneland Ignite Personalized Learning Academy specifically, with the intent of making sure that there was a level of awareness around that opportunity. If students were self-identifying as seeking personalized experiences, we wanted to make sure that they were aware of the opportunities within the district. We have been hosting many tours, not just for families interested in attending, but for our own staff as well, who are wanting to learn more about, in theory, I understand what personalized learning at Ignite looks like, but can I come out and actually observe it in practice? And so we've had quite a few staff come out to observe that. We've also had several students coming out as part of in-district field trips to participate in some escape rooms that are at the Meredith campus. And during that, they also get to have an opportunity to answer or to ask questions of a KIPLA student panel. So it's really a student-to-student dialogue opportunity where kids are just asking kids about the experience and what that's like. We did work with our EAC, our Elementary Advisory Council, to update some of the talking points that were shared with teachers just prior to parent-teacher conferences. Again, to make sure, had parents received an email saying my student has self-identified as really seeking personalized structures, wanting to make sure that teachers felt that they had good information to share back. And if they didn't know an answer to a question, certainly knowing where to direct those questions. So those talking points and even indicators of students who would succeed in these types of environments were updated and shared with all staff. Hopefully you've seen some yard signs around. We did create some yard signs, mostly to communicate a much earlier enrollment timeline than we've ever done in the past. Knowing that we're looking and we're wanting to garner interest to expanding to 9th and 10th grade, as well as meeting our staffing timeline planning, we needed to increase enrollment deadlines much earlier. So this year we were seeking interest by November 22nd. And so the next slide, this will work now, thank you guys. So the next slide is what that current enrollment projection was. It may be slightly off from what you have in your packet. I did update it just on Friday with the most recent registration, so if it's off by a few numbers, that might be why. But as you can see, we've got the projected by grade level for next year. We currently in Inspire, which is the 3rd through 5th grade section, we do have 40 students currently in that section. Next year, once those 5th graders roll over, the current enrollment by November 22nd was down to 21 students. That's relatively unsurprising, primarily in that the elementary enrollment tended in the past 2 years to take place much later in the spring. And so whether that increased timeline impacted that, certainly the decrease is pretty significant with our 5th graders moving on into the Empower section. In Empower, we've had the exact opposite. That's the 6th through 8th grade section, which is up in enrollment by just about 20, I think that's 19 students there. And so as you can see, those low 8th grade numbers that we've had the last 2 years, next year we'll have a significant 8th grade class at that KIPLA level. And then high school, which we've been talking about pretty significantly over the last year and a half, we really made that push to make sure that we had taken every step we felt we could to see, is there that interest in expanding to the 9th and 10th grade. We had talked about the number of potentially about 25 students, garnering that conversation moving forward. So I wanted to bring back and share with you, as of this Friday, when these numbers were just updated, we had a total of 6 students who had committed to the extent that they had registered already for next year. So that number is less than the 25 that we had talked about previously. And then, it's working, I forgot. Our next step, I believe Dr. Rowling was going to talk about next steps, but do you have any questions for me about the PR strategies, the current enrollment numbers, or the projected enrollment numbers?
So for the 3rd through 5th graders, I know it was super early for them to register now. Can they still register if they want to later on?
That is a conversation I believe we'll continue to have with HR, but that was the initial conversation, is that as long as we had the space, we would continue to take that enrollment.
Okay.
And we generally, I believe we've had rolling enrollment also, where students at any point in the year could opt to transfer to the KIPLA program. Or back the other way.
Yeah.
Well, given this information and given the expected cost of opening a 9-10 program at KIPLA, what I'm going to do is ask our team to really look at other models that might work, given that we do have a substantial current 7th grade, next year's 8th grade, looking at other models for personalized learning experiences for our students at the high school level. The high school levels, in terms of opportunities for AP coursework, dual credit coursework, CTE, a lot of things we just talked about, right? With the high school, it's a little more complex, so having them go back to the drawing board, look at different models that might be more sustainable, more attractive to our student body for possible launch in the fall of '26. So essentially looking for a different way to propose high school for our students, and then continuing to focus on what we're doing with the 3rd through 8th graders, and continually improving that program.
Questions, discussion? No? Okay. There's no action, thank you. There's no action necessary tonight for the KIPLA update. 5th item of new business is the approval of the a la carte food service program pricing update. Dr. Bogan.
Yes, in your packet, you will find a memo specifically with our current a la carte pricing that we have at the middle school and also at the high school. As you've seen in some recent board meetings and recent board packets and updates, we've really been focused on, what efficiencies there are, the credit card processing fees, joining a group purchasing organization are all great steps, and so I'm very appreciative that those were approved. The other area that we've really focused on is our resale pricing. And one of the things that we found is that over the last 5 years, we have seen significant increases in food costs, as I shared previously. But our resale pricing of items has not kept pace with that. And so D.G. Statler, our food service director, and I, we really looked at all of the individual items and tried to decide, and decipher what are some changes that we could do that would positively impact not only the resale value of that and revenue, but also keeping in mind what are good choices, what are healthy choices for kids. And so on this list, it's very intentional. You will not see a water bottle. You will not see a fruit, a vegetable, anything to do with salads, sandwiches, those types of things. All of the items that we are proposing, increases that pretty much range, the vast majority of them about 25 cents. A few two at 50 cents, and I think there's one at 75-cent increase. Are those really those prepackaged items? Things like donuts, things like ice cream, Uncrustables, cinnamon rolls, cookies, those types of items. You know, hot dogs, cheeseburgers, those types of things. So that hopefully, you know, we are still giving kids, you know, the opportunity to make healthy choices at lunch, but also recognize that our food cost on much of these prepackaged items is significantly higher, and so we do need to adjust that. Typically, we would make an adjustment like this at the beginning of the year, but we haven't made adjustments for quite some time, and so in looking at this, coupling it with all of the other changes that we're making this year, we would like this change to coincide after students and staff return from the winter break to have that take effect. So, we are asking for your approval tonight for those resale decisions.
Should be effective January.
Yes. Are there any questions?
Okay. Hearing no questions or further discussion, at this time I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the food service resale increases as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McCauley?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankiewicz?
Aye.
Mr. Fleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. The a la carte food service program pricing is approved. The sixth item of new business is the summer 2025 capital projects plan. Dr. Bogan.
Sure, I'm gonna ask Mr. Mark Keaton, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, to come up. I'm just gonna kick this off. So we are presenting tonight our projects, our capital projects plan for summer of 2025. I do just wanna make special note of two items. One, Mr. Payton will be presenting about one item. It is a digital radio conversion that is district-wide. I do want to let the board know that we anticipate this project being about $100,000. We are applying currently for the school maintenance project grant. It is a grant that the state of Illinois has offered for several years. We do apply for it every year. Districts are able to receive up to $50,000, and so we, with matching local funds, and so since we do have a project that could be covered by 50% of that, we will be seeking that. And I did not reflect that in the cost. The total project cost is reflected on the sheet, but it will be $50,000 in local funds and then $50,000 from the school maintenance project grant that will fund that. And then I will turn it over to Mr. Payton.
Okay, I was just gonna spend a few minutes to kind of run down the list of items that we're looking for approval on this year. One thing to note, the very last item on the list, that's included in error. That is not something that we intend to do at this time, primarily because this list is made up, Dr. Bogan and I and a couple of the building administrators at the high school went through the list of potential projects and said, okay, if we were to seek a referendum and if it were to pass, would this be impacted by that? So we don't want to spend money on something and then undo it 3 years down the road. So that's why it's a lot of little things that we're trying to clean up here. And that last item on the list would actually be something that would be impacted by a successful referendum, so we want to get that off of there. A couple items, starting from the top, replacement of the auto yard fence for Fox Valley Career Center. There's the elevator manufacturer that manufactured the elevator at Blackberry Creek. They've obsoleted the up-down button, so we have to replace those buttons. It's not something that anybody wants to do, but we can wait till it fails, but then we've got an elevator that doesn't work until we get it replaced, so we're going to be proactive on that. We've got some damaged concrete in a handicap zone at McDowell that we would look to replace. The Harder Middle School walk-in cooler, the tubing that carries the refrigerant is failing, so we need to replace that. We're not replacing the whole cooler, we're replacing the refrigerant section of it. Air conditioning, the MDF room at John Shields Elementary has failed, needs to be replaced. Some minor life safety work at the high school. Driver's ed car at the high school. As Dr. Bogan mentioned, digital radio conversion throughout the district. That would include buses, every building, new repeaters, new radios. In some cases, a lot of the bus radios, they don't need to be new, they just needed to be reprogrammed to work digital rather than analog. So we'll work with a radio company to accomplish all that and get us better communication throughout the district to maintain safety and security. Replacement of desks in the office at the business office, additional chairs and student seating for Harder Middle School, couple of kitchen items at the high school. That equipment is over 20 years old now, so it's starting to age out, and so we're just every other year, we're replacing a few pieces of equipment to kind of stay on top of that. Clock systems at Blackberry and Stewart are failing, need to be replaced. Some lintels, and that's masonry work that needs to happen at John Stewart. And then something that we started kind of in the teens, the 2014, 15, 16 timeframe, was refreshing furniture at the high school. So it took a pause there for several years. We'd like to get back into doing that. The nice thing is, even if we pass a referendum, the furniture won't be bad. We'll just move it out, do the work into the classroom, move it back in, and if the referendum were not to move forward, well, then we're working on updating things. And finally, there's a partition wall between two classrooms in the Fox Valley Career Center. We're going to remove that partition wall. In my time with the district, 14, 15 years, nobody's ever opened that wall. The director of the Fox Valley Career Center would like to remove the wall and put an actual permanent wall in there, so he has two separate classrooms. So that's the final item. So then the ultimate total when we take out that $15,000 would be $518,000, not $533,000. Any questions on any of those items?
Can you just refresh, like, previous years for the summer projects, the totals? Where are we at compared to?
So, thank you for asking that question. So we are significantly lower. So typically the district spends about $1 million, but one of the things that we were very intentional about, because we still have a possible referendum in April, is that we pulled off any project that would potentially be touched by a successful referendum, because we don't want to have to do the work. And so that's why most of these are equipment related, safety related, all of that. So we're about $500,000 short of what we typically spend. The last couple of years, we've put additional dollars and spent closer to $2 million, $2.5 million. And so, sort of perfect segue to this, but should we not have a successful run, you could anticipate this time next year me coming back with a significantly higher ask in terms of what we need to do, because we'll need to be, you know, really planning and getting some large scale projects done each and every year for quite a few years. So this is significantly lower than the board is used to seeing.
Questions? Comments? Good? Okay. Hearing no further questions or discussion, thank you for the information. I will entertain a motion at this time that the Board of Education approve the summer 2025 capital project list for $533,000.
Nope, 518.
Sorry,
$518,000.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The summary 2025 capital projects list is approved for $518,000. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Okay, on to the next item. The seventh item of new business is the approval of policies from press issue number 16 and number 17, first reading. Dr. Layden?
Yes, thank you. As Board President Gonzalez said, it's on first reading, so I'll go through and we'll talk through these, and then it'll come back to the next meeting on consent for approval. If you recall, issue 116 came out in October, but due to lawsuits that were taking place across the State Board of Education and both legal firms that we worked with at the time both said that we should hold on that to make sure that we're not part of any of those lawsuits, and upon further review, we are not. So as 116 now should move forward, and these are all part of Title IX. If you recall, Title IX had several updates effective July 1 of '24 for this school year, and all of our administrators received that additional training and updated training to match what these procedures are. So now that the board will be approving these at the next meeting based on Title IX, we'll make sure we have the proper updates across the district to staff. Out of 117, the only one that had an option to it is the Accelerated Placement Program. So if you want to join and turn to page 50 of the packet, all the rest are all footnotes, statute, and legal updates. As you reviewed all of those, if there are questions, I can go back to any of those, but those again are all required based on statute or footnotes in the law. But what I do is I want to share with you in 6-135, this is the only one that has an option, and our current practice has been typically bringing those to your attention and then making sure we're on the same page, because this is something that the board should determine. Under number 5 at the bottom, it does say that this is an option for the board, and at this time I'm recommending not to accept this option and to move forward with this, because what it says is that a waiver of a course completion requirement for graduation could be determined for a student right now if they have mastery of it or competency in that content. So at this point right now, this is a bigger conversation for a student to be able to have a competency test or take an assessment and say, Todd's good, he's done with Algebra 1, he's done with U.S. History, those classes. Because right now, we have in our district, policy, District 6300, we have to be in school, our students have to be in school a minimum of 7 semesters. So if we had an option like this, students could take multiple assessments potentially and then waive out of classes and then graduate sooner. But that's not part of our curriculum right now. We've not had that discussion. We don't have in place what an assessment would look like, what a competency assessment would look like. So at this point, it would be our recommendation to not accept this option. And as I checked with other superintendents, they are not accepting it either, because these are going to be bigger conversations to have, what that might look like and what that impact then would be for students. Sure. So and again, it's something the board could consider later on, because again, these come out every 5 years at a minimum with updates, and then they are now acted upon and put in place. But then again, if the board, for some reason, under a new strategic plan, under a new academic realm, could look at this again or look at any of our policies. But right now, we just don't have mechanisms in place to recommend this option or to be prepared to put it in place for the fall when it would go into place. We just wouldn't be ready for it. Any questions on that option? And again, it could always be revisited later. And then the other ones, because there's 25 total with both packets 116 and 117. Again, the other ones were statute, regular code updates, and again, at a minimum of every 5 years, they come to the board. And also this packet goes to each of our department levels. So as soon as the board approves these, they then go into place. They're then reviewed by department levels and then implemented across the district, just as a regular practice. Any questions on either 116 or 117, the policies? So so then be just action to approve on first reading, and then again, it would come back in consent. If you have time to review, or as you review again, if you have questions, it would come back in consent, can always be revisited if there are any questions that arise between now and Monday. It's a quick turnaround. So read them fast and read them now.
Okay, hearing no further questions or discussion, I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommended policy changes for press on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mr. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Crosby.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Mr. Lally.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 7-0. The policies from press are approved on first reading. It's now time for the superintendent/board report. Dr. Layton.
Yep, the first one, last Wednesday night, the Hall of Fame committee met. We meet 4 times a year, and thank you to Board Member Mankowski for attending, being our board member representative. We did have 2 primary topics that we covered, and I don't know if you want to mention either one of those, Mr. Mankowski, or if you'd like me to cover those.
Well, go ahead and cover.
Okay, then if you have anything you'd like to add. The first one is primarily our nominees are due by December 1st, so we take a look at all of the nominations, all of the recommendations or nominations that have come in for the 24-25 school year. We look at those, we look at the packets to make sure that they're fully complete, and then we will act on those in February. So February is when we actually vote, so we look through those to make sure they have all of the application, a resume, letters of support to make sure that they're full. And then the second thing we look at is our inductees that are going in this year, so the class of 24-25 that are actually going in this year, that we have a time and a place in which we're celebrating all of those and recognizing those, and those are going to be done both January 17th for half of them, and then the other half are going to be going in January 24th. Both of those are at basketball games, and that's when they would be going into the Hall of Fame, and those usually take place during either before the game or at halftime, and then we also have a reception afterwards, whether it's in the library or the auditorium, for those that are family members, those that are friends. They have a chance then to go and visit with the inductees, hear a little bit more about their stories, whereas the public piece is just between games, and that's more of a quick process that they are recognized. Mr. Mankowski, anything else from?
No, you essentially summarized it.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
So then we vote next, in February, make sure all the packets are complete, then we vote, and then we would share the, what the next steps would be for this year's class.
There was a discussion about how to treat state placing teams, not necessarily champion, but there was a state runner-up. Was there not?
In the bylaws,
There was
state champs are automatic.
Automatic.
But
where-
second and third are not, so we're trying to have that discussion, is that still a high enough success level where it should be automatic, or should they have to be nominated and then voted on?
And that's a policy that we're mulling over and going to comment by the upcoming meetings. Yeah.
Good memory.
Well, no, it's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's one that we've talked about a lot, because if someone finished second in state by a point, almost a state champ, but should they still be automatic or not? And then other recognition for other state groups, activities as well, and music and band and choral.
Yeah.
So that's coming up. Thursday, the 19th of December, we have our last CAC meeting of the fall, and the primary topic for this meeting upcoming will be referendum conversation. So based on the board's conversation on Monday, the 16th, and then the pending action on the question, we then will have a follow-up with CAC and with, as we shared before, with lower turnouts at FAC and lower turnouts at FPC, we'll be inviting those groups to come as well to hopefully get a greater turnout, and then any other community members that would like to come to learn more about it can. So we'll have a safety and a security update from Dr. Bogan, and then a tour as well for the project, since they're primarily at the high school. And again, board members, we don't have a representative on CAC, but any and all board members are welcome to attend as your availability allows. Chief Tyndall is in the back. We have asked Chief Tyndall for regular updates at this meeting tonight, and then December 16th, We don't have anything immediate from Chief Tyndall or from Caneville right now. So what we'll plan to do then is have a next regular update with a presentation and any other new information at our January 13th meeting.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you for coming out, Chief Tyndall.
Yep.
And then lastly, as we do our curriculum updates on a regular cycle, right now one of the discussions we are having is surrounding exploratories at the EC5 level. And as a district, we've communicated through the KCN, through the nightly news, and social media. So what we're trying to do is get feedback from the community on the EC5 exploratories as we are considering what programming should look like. Should it remain the same? Is there something different out there in the realm of what maybe elementary students would benefit from? That feedback is always important. Just like we looked at student feedback, parent feedback, and staff feedback for the referendum, we do it for curriculum as well. So we are going to keep that open for another week. So if you see that and have feedback, or you've already filled it out and you want to tell your friends to fill it out as well, that would be welcome, just to try to get the higher response rate as possible. Any questions on the exploratory EC5 curriculum piece? All right, those are mine. Thank you.
Second to last superintendent.
That is the second to last. I'll make the next one. The next one's going to go on forever. I'm not willing to give it up yet, so be comfortable next week.
Filibuster.
Yeah.
Flip home book.
Thank you.
Dr. Rowley.
Just a couple for me. The Madrigal Singers went on tour last Friday, performed for all the students all over Kaneland. We got a sneak preview. They sang for the district office folks in the foyer of the high school. I'm not sure the acoustics there are ideal, but they did an amazing job. They have a series of performances coming up this weekend. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. I'll be in attendance on Friday. I heard the food is good, so I'm looking forward to that. I had the opportunity to attend my first joint annual conference with Kaneland, and a couple of the highlights. Probably the biggest highlight was seeing our Madrigal Singers sing the national anthem. The number of text messages I got immediately after from people I know in the crowd was amazing. Fantastic to see our kids performing at that level, showing off the quality of performances that we have here. Additionally, was able to attend a number of great sessions, one specifically focused on school safety. Dr. Bogan attended the same one, just at a different time. Mr. Chavez attended the one with me. I think as a team we're going to get together, talk about what are some best practices, how do we partner with our community first responders to make sure all the people are on the same page, and Chief Tyndall has done a great job of being an active part of our community, so we'll be working with him. And then a session specifically about AI and how different school districts are using that. Dr. Horn is leading a committee right now looking at some possible guidelines and an approach here in Kaneland. So look forward to that this spring with some information coming out of that. Those are the things that I saw that were, I think, impactful.
Dr. Bogan. Okay, Ms. Slattery, you're up.
Good evening. Boys basketball continued their record of 5-1 with wins against Ottawa, Sandwich, and Marmion Academy this week. They'll play Sycamore at home on the 11th and away at Rochelle on the 13th. Girls basketball fell to Ottawa, unfortunately, 27-34 on last Friday, and will play Sycamore this week at home on the 13th as well. Boys track has started their preseason workouts to prepare for the upcoming indoor track season. They've been working really hard after school and had their first Friday finisher, in which they worked out in the West Gym Fitness Center all together. This week at the high school, we're celebrating the holidays with a Holiday Spirit Week set up by Student Council. Today, Monday, was Holiday PJs. Tomorrow is Dress Up as Your Favorite Holiday. Wednesday is holiday colors, so like green, red, blue, yellow. Thursday is Winter Wonderland, which is essentially just like a whiteout, and Friday is fun holiday sweaters. And then that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, they wanted me to talk, I went to the joint annual conference as well, they wanted me to talk about it, I'll keep it brief. The highlight for me for sure was seeing the madrigals in front of the entire state, you know, it was amazing. They did amazing. I took quite a few sessions, a couple leadership sessions, board president sessions, one TIF session that really affirmed that we're not the only ones dealing with the obstacles we're seeing, and so very informative and also eye-opening. So always appreciate the opportunity to go out there and learn and grow. So thank you guys. Okay. So move forward. Topics for future agendas. Once, twice. No? Okay. Round 2 public comments. We have 3 signed up. So same parameters as before. You guys know the drill. So I'll start with Ms. Albano. Ms. Albano.
Hi, my name is Sheila Albano. I'm from Elburn, and once again, sitting here for referendum updates and various things like that. I have to say, again, kudos to your team who've been out and about. I saw them at Elburn Stroll. None of that happened. I don't know, I just can't emphasize enough that none of that happened before. We didn't have any of this, and it's amazing and wonderful. So I feel that I want to say to everybody who are like, do we trust them? Well, all I can say is they're doing everything we asked of the other group that wouldn't do it, and now they're doing it. So take that as you will. The issue on voting for how much, I need to go home and look at all those little numbers and details that I couldn't read. But my question is, if we don't go for the 140,000 or $1 million, and I completely understand the tax situation, we're going to have people who are going to vote no because they know they can't pay it. That's, I would do the same if I was in that position. It's what you have to do. But if we don't go for the 140, then when are we going to fix those things that we don't fix this time? And it's okay if you just choose not to, but then you have to also explain when you're going to do it and how that's going to fit into the schedule and how you're going to build out that maintenance schedule for all of your roofs and the track and the mechanicals and everything else, that as we've been in these meetings, and people are shocked at how nothing has been done in 50 years, 60 years. You're not going to be able to do that going forward either, because you'll still be paying for all of these things that need to be replaced. And since we cannot build a new high school, if people can't do 140 million, you sure as hell can't do 250 million. So when is that going to happen? The other thing I like for a topic of next meeting is if someone were to donate large amounts of money to an entity that's being added or fixed in this, such as a field house, how can we make that work within your referendum? I've talked before, and with some of them, they've thought, well, the referendum has to pass. If donations came in, we would rebate that money back out. But I'd like that explained so that that's something we could take to people, because I think there are options for money out there in our Kaneland community, but they're not going to come in until all of this is decided. So, and I think you need to look at your capital building and decide, as wonderful as that program is, if you're putting all that money in there, and then you're going to go ask people to pay more money for when you've put all that money into over 100, less than 100 kids. Thanks. And I love it's not that.
Okay, next up we have Scott Stalka.
Scott Stalkup from Sugar Grove. I almost didn't have to come up here because Sheila hit almost everything. The only thing she missed was The only question I had, is there an opportunity to advertise on areas like if we end up with a new scoreboard as part of a stadium? Is there an opportunity for advertisement there from Pepsi, Coke, Monster, anybody, a local business that we could get a donation and reciprocate putting their name up? Or even a fence or a banner around the chain link on the track? Anything. That was the only thing that I had in addition to what, Sheila kind of mentioned. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up is Tonya Grosinger.
You need me to say Tonya Grosinger from Maple Park, or do we all know by now?
Just because it's part of the rules.
I'm joking. I just gotta make it different every time I come up a little bit. My frustration right now, I know what the high school and elementary schools and stuff need. The 140 million ask isn't outrageous given the information that's been brought to all of us, especially those of us paying attention over the last few years, right? My problem is we have a whole school with staff of 10 plus staff members and roughly 100 children taking up budget. Now, I don't know how all of it works. I'm trying to learn, right, along with many of you. What we spend here, can we use it here, and all of this. It's just frustrating from the outside, and I don't know if there's a way to explain it better to everybody else. To have 10 plus staff members for 100 kids in a school. Now I get KMAC would be operating lights, AC, heat, all of that because we have FECC, we have offices over there. So I understand that part of it. That's separate. I'm talking strictly staffing for 100 kids. We have a principal for 100 kids. My kid's elementary school has one principal too. They have more than 100 kids. It just seems a little bit outrageous to me to come to the community in a time like this. We're already paying on a referendum. We still have 4+ years roughly left of that to come and ask for 140 million more and then staff an entire school for 100 kids. I'm so glad it's working for these kids. That has nothing to do with my concern. I have to separate my feelings for the children versus financial, and this is what I'm hearing, and this is what I'm feeling. It's really hard for me to want to push this 140, knowing what I know, knowing how much I know, when that is happening also. So I just want it out there. That is the question I'm getting a lot of. That's a personal question I'm fighting with. I don't know what I'm going to do in April, and it's 100% because of this, 100%. And my husband's the same way. So I just want that out there. I'm trying to learn. I'll probably be reaching out to Ms. Bogan to ask some more questions, but that's the real dilemma, and that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. So if there's a way to help us through this, please reach out, because I'm 100% conflicted right now. Thanks.
For your comments. Does anyone else want to take this opportunity to speak? State your name and village of residence, please.
My name is Rob Owens. I'm from Montgomery, Illinois. Let's see, you heard my wife Giovanna speak earlier about my son Ozzy, who's 6 years old and has Down syndrome. It's difficult to sit here and listen to all the numbers being thrown around, but I'm happy that you found the 160 grand because that could help our son. Anyway, I'm speaking here tonight to express my profound disappointment regarding the handling of my son's outplacement situation within our school district. For the past couple weeks, my child's been without access to education, which has caused significant distress not only for him, but for our entire family. It is disheartening to report that throughout this time, we have not received any communication from the district to inquire about my child's well-being or provide support during this challenging period. The lack of outreach and assistance has left our family neglected and abandoned. It's as if our concerns and our child's education needs have been disregarded entirely. In light of the Individuals and Disabilities Education Act, which guarantees every child with a disability the right to free, appropriate public education, I am particularly concerned about the lack of timely education access provided to my child during this outplacement situation. The delays we have experienced not only violate the spirit of this law, but also leave us feeling abandoned during a critical time in our child's educational journey. As a parent, I expected a collaborative partnership with the school district, especially when it comes to my child's education and well-being. This absence of proactive communication and support has left us heartbroken and searching for answers. We find ourselves in a position we are compelled to go public with our story in hopes of finding a resolution. I urge the school district to prioritize the needs of special education students and their families by ensuring that adequate support systems are in place. Effective communication is essential, and it's critical that families are kept informed and involved in decisions affecting their children's education. Moreover, the lack of attention and action towards inclusive efforts within our schools is noticeably unmet. Inclusion is not merely a policy, it's a commitment to ensuring that every student, regardless of their abilities or backgrounds, feels welcomed, valued, and supported in the Kaneland schools. Unfortunately, we have noticed that many of the initiatives and discussions surrounding inclusion have been overlooked or inadequately addressed throughout our district. Families unable to get the help their children need leaving the district. It is disheartening it's disheartening to see that despite the growing recognition of the importance of inclusion education, our district has not taken the necessary steps to implement these values effectively in each of their schools. This oversight not only affects students with diverse needs, but also impacts the entire school community as well. I urge the school board to prioritize inclusion by keeping staff in each building accountable to doing so, developing comprehensive training programs for staff, ensuring appropriate resources. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Rose. Mr. Duffy, did you want to cover it? Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the closed session portion of the meeting for tonight. So the Board of Education is scheduled for a closed session to discuss Illinois Open Meetings Act 2C1, where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss Illinois Open Meetings Act 2C1 at 8:57 p.m.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Mankiewicz?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mr. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. Polly?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.